Will the April 3rd, 2013 meeting of the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission please come to order? Thank you all for your attendance this evening. For the benefit of those present who may not have participated in the P&Z meeting, I will review our public hearing procedure, which is as follows. We will read the legal notice for the public hearing portion of this meeting is published in the local newspaper. The applicants will then be invited to come forward and present their case, explaining to the Commission and the public what is specifically being requested of the subject property. Written comments from town agencies pertaining to the application will then be read into the record if the Commission has received any. The Commissioners will then ask their clarifying questions, and then the public will be invited to ask any questions they may have about the application. I will then ask those in attendance who support the application to please come forward and make their statement, and then I will ask those in attendance who oppose the application to please come forward and make their statement. As this is a public hearing, it will be necessary for those coming forward to ask questions or to speak for or against any application to please identify themselves and state their name and address for the record prior to proceeding. At the conclusion of all statements from the public and the applicant, I will close the public hearing on the application. The applicant and the public are then free to leave or remain for the balance of the public hearings and the regular meeting, at which time the Commission will discuss each application under consideration and try to reach a decision. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to any decisions of this Commission. The applicant and/or any aggrieved party with legal standing will have the right to appeal these decisions to Superior Court within the statutory time frame if they so desire. All decisions reached at this meeting will be available to the public the next day by either visiting or calling the Planning and Zoning Office after 9:30 a.m. Seated this evening are the following Guilford P&Z Commissioners: Tom Cost, David Grigsby, I'm Ray Bauer, Peter Golitz, Kim Bailey, Walter Corbiere, Greg Musilli, and Frank DeAndrea. Staff present this evening are George Crowell, Town Planner, and Reggie Reed, Zoning Enforcement Officer. Our videographer this evening is Shannon Gale, and our recording secretary is Donette. Will the secretary please read the legal notice?
Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on April 3, 2013 at 7:30 p.m. at the Nathaniel B. Green Community Center, Guilford Whitfield Room, first floor, 32 Church Street, Guilford, Connecticut, for the following purposes. 1. Proposed amendment to Zoning Code, Article 31, Town Center South Overlay Zone District. Amend the Zoning Code to create a new Article 31. There is hereby created a Town Center South Overlay Zone District. This district allows by special permit residential and commercial uses in addition to the uses allowed by the underlying districts. These new uses are intended to be appropriate to a transit-oriented neighborhood and generally are higher density and more intense than otherwise allowed. 2. Proposed amendment to the zoning map. Amend the zoning map by adding an overlay district known as the Town Center South Overlay District. This district generally encompasses the area around the Guilford train station, including Whitfield Street, both north and south of the railroad tracks extending to the town marina on the south. 3. Proposed amendment to Zoning Code, Section 27358L, subsection 6. Existing non-conforming billboard signs may be replaced by LED signs subject to special permit approval in accordance with Article 10 if 1. The area of said billboard is reduced by a minimum of 50%. 2. The LED sign content change occurs no more frequently than every 8 seconds. And 3. The sign is in compliance with all rules and regulations of the State of Connecticut Department of Transportation in effect at the time of the adoption of this regulation. 4. Proposed amendment to Zoning Code Section 273-2, definition of billboard. Any object, device, display, or structure which is used for attracting attention to any use, product, service, or activity not conducted, sold, or offered on premises where such advertising sign or billboard is located. Copies of these applications are available for inspection in the office of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Town Hall South, 50 Boston Street, Guilford, Connecticut. At this hearing, persons may attend and be heard, and written communications will be received dated at Guilford, Connecticut, this 14th day of March 2013. Ray Bauer, Chairman.
Thank you very much, David. Just before we get started, if there's anybody here for the Bennett Hall application. That was an application that was continued from our last meeting. The applicant has withdrawn that application, so that will not be heard and that will not be going forward. So again, if that's the only reason you're here, there's no need to attend. With regard to the LED signs, George, Reggie, do you know if the applicant is present? Very good. Okay. In the interest of saving time, we'll take that application first. What I would like to do is hear both item 3 and 4. That's the proposed amendment to the zoning code 273-58L6 and the 273-2. That's the definition of a billboard. We'll take those both together. We will, however, vote on those separately. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, our attorney is obviously because we were second on the agenda.
Okay.
And he'll be arriving shortly.
All right. Then in the interest of time, let's move to the first item, which is proposed amendment to the zoning code for the Town Center South Overlay District. And in addition, the proposed amendment to the zoning map that goes along with that. Let's take both of those together for one public hearing, and we will then vote on those separately.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
You guys just take the turn on.
I'm George Crowell, Town Planner. This is a petition of the town on behalf of those of us, including the Planning and Zoning Commission, who have been working on the Town Center South planning project for many years. I'm going to explain the regulation and the map, the way the proposal works, the text, and describe the map in a moment. Brian McGlone, the town's economic development officer, is going to talk a little bit about the history of this project and why we're here tonight, and then he's also going to introduce several guests that we have with us who are here to speak about this proposal and how it might relate to properties that they have an interest in. As the Commission knows, the development of the Town Center South zoning code, the proposed Town Center South overlay zone district, has been in the works for many years. This has been developed pursuant to the Town Center South plan, which was adopted by the Commission several years ago as an addendum to the plan of conservation and development. The intent of the Town Center South plan and the intent of these regulations is to encourage development in the Town Center South area that's consistent with the concept of transit-oriented development, to encourage new uses in the area, particularly residential and commercial uses, as was alluded to, and to encourage the conversion and redevelopment of some of the industrial property in the Town Center South district to these new uses. The basic concept of the overlay zone is to create a vehicle with standards and provisions for allowing these new uses by special permit. They would not affect this new regulation. The overlay zone would not affect the use and enjoyment of the properties under their existing zoning. No nonconformities would be created as a result of this, so those property owners who have industrial property may continue to use and develop their property in accordance with the existing zoning. The overlay concept is designed to allow new uses and in fact create provisions for allowing new uses on those properties. The district will be referred to as the Town Center South Overlay Zone District. Its purpose is to encourage and guide new development within the district in accordance with the Town Center South Plan, dated January 2007. The goals of the district are the same as the goals in the Town Center South Plan: encourage the development of mixed-use, higher-density, transit-oriented neighborhood, promote increased service on Shoreline East, enhance pedestrian opportunities and safety in the Town Center South area, encourage environmentally appropriate economic development, preserve historic resources, encourage beautification and redevelopment, preserve the village character and scale of the Town Center South area, promote infrastructure improvements, protect tidal marshes, the shoreline, Sluice Creek, and other fragile ecosystems, and enhance open spaces and access to Long Island Sound. These purposes are included in the new text of the new zoning regulations, and those words are the same as the words that were developed as part of the Town Center South plan. The new district, as I mentioned, allows new uses by special permit. They may be allowed on any lot in a non-residential zone, these new uses, by special permit in accordance with this article and also Article 10, which is the article of the zoning code that describes the process and procedures for all special permits. Notwithstanding the uses that are allowed in the underlying zone, regardless of whether it's a residential or industrial zone, new uses may be established subject to the provisions of this section of the regulations. Projects should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, as is the process for special permits, and will be evaluated by the commission in accordance with their in accordance with the Town Center South plan and also the following standards. Residential uses are allowed, residential densities. In general, higher density residential use is encouraged, not to exceed 6 units per acre of land. Building height, no building shall exceed 60 feet in height. Building height in excess of 40 feet may be allowed in consideration of increased freeboard height above sea level requirements associated with anticipated sea level rise. This provision is included in this text as a criteria in order to facilitate development in low-lying areas that might be subject to flooding, potentially in lieu of or in view of the possibility of increased sea level rise, encouraging, for example, parking underneath buildings, structured parking underneath buildings with livable areas above, thus allowing for buildings that are generally taller. Again, subject to a special permit. Retail uses can be permitted, primarily when they serve the needs of transit users and the immediate neighborhood, as opposed to a retail use that might be oriented to the entire community or a regional use. No single retail use shall exceed 10,000 square feet, thus prohibiting any kind of large-scale retail development in the area. Offices are also encouraged in appropriate locations, especially when the users or the occupants of the office space are arriving by transit. Parking is designed to meet the needs of the particular use. Shared parking is encouraged, and the possibility of transit use should be taken into consideration and may obviate the need to provide excessive parking, hopefully. A high building coverage ratio is encouraged, with total impervious coverage not to exceed 80%. In order to mitigate any adverse impacts associated with high building coverage, the low-impact development practices that the town employs shall be included. Sea level rise. New development shall be in accordance with the town's coastal resilience plan, respecting the potential for sea level rise and for increasing storm frequency. All aspects of design of new projects subject to this, this provision of the regulation shall be high quality, including designers and architects striving for the best possible design solutions. Wetland preservation and mitigation is required. Innovative solutions to sewage disposal needs are encouraged, including high technology systems and also the sharing of sewage disposal capacity. Brian's going to talk about that in a moment, how we're proceeding simultaneously, the town is, to create some sewage disposal capacity for the development that we envision in this area. A diversity of housing sizes and price levels is encouraged. And the final criteria that I want to mention is that projects may be permitted under this section in residential zones when the principal development is located in a non-residential zone district, and when said residential zone is adjacent to a non-residential zone, and the use of the residentially zoned property is necessary in order to facilitate a successful project. The procedures for making a special permit application and considering one are described in this proposed text. Notice to property owners is required within 100 feet. Applications involving the use of shared sewage disposal systems have to be referred to the Board of Selectmen. Historic district requirements will be applied. And for housing units, for housing developments greater than 50 units or offices more than 20,000 square feet, a traffic study may be required. That's the text of the zoning regulations that are being proposed. Again, it's an overlay zone district. The concept of that is to allow the use and enjoyment of property under the existing zoning as it exists today, but also to create a provision through the overlay zoning concept and the special permit to allow these new uses and the redevelopment of existing property. The final criteria that I mentioned there about non-residential use is added because of some concerns that were expressed that this might inadvertently consider or encourage the redevelopment of existing residentially zoned areas in a manner that's inappropriate. That's not the intent of this regulation, and that's why that provision was added to prohibit the redevelopment pursuant to this section of property that is exclusively residentially zoned unless it's adjacent to and part of a larger development that's taking place or proposed to take place in an industrial or commercial zone. Let me show you the map so that we understand what the zone district is. I'll go over that quickly, and then Brian can talk a little bit further about how this relates to what's going on right today. Some of you may have a copy of this map. As was described in the legal notice, the area shown on this map by an outline, a red outline. Generally speaking, on the eastern border of the proposed district is Sluice Creek. The southern border is Long Island Sound. The western border is the West River. The district includes areas north of the railroad tracks up until including the 66 High Street property, which many of you are familiar with. It's also bounded on the north by Francis Lane, which comes over to Whitfield Street. The property includes a portion of most of Whitfield Street, below Francis Street down to Stonehouse Lane. The proposed district includes the Woodruff property on Stonehouse Lane, and then follows the creek or the drainage that separates the Woodruff property from the Rollwood complex, and includes the industrial land that's north of the railroad tracks, including the Public Works Garage. So if anyone has any questions about the district, I'll be happy to answer those later. But right now, I'll introduce Brian.
Thank you, George. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Brian McGlone, the Economic Development Coordinator for the town. Some of my comments probably will just reinforce George's. But what brought us here? I mean, of course, the 2007 plan, Town Center South plan, was developed 6 years ago because of the economy. Nothing really was happening or has happened. It's been a tough economic environment for residential, all aspects. However, our developers, the owners of the property, came to us probably a little over a year ago, about a year ago, and started talking to us about alternate uses, what they perceive to be maybe the best uses for these properties, and what kind of benefits might there be for the town. And certainly, one of the elements is some diversity in housing. We have a shortage of apartments, and there's planned apartments in here. There's condominiums planned. There could be some mixed-use, live-work opportunities to capitalize on the transit-oriented in close proximity to the train station. But certainly, we are expecting a positive contribution, tax contribution over time as these things get developed. The value will increase significantly and positively impact our grand list. And preliminary discussion, we really feel there's a limited impact on services in preliminary conversations with our fire, police department, the other service areas. We don't think there's going to be a major negative impact or financial impact on the town. So as we said, everything we're talking about is really in this direction and follows the guidelines that were defined in the Town Center South Plan going back to '07. So from our standpoint, we're trying to get out front with this from a process standpoint, get these changes in place now so that as the economy continues to show improvement, because everyone knows the construction cycle and everything else, the build cycle is going to take some kind of time. So we wanted to get these actions out in front first, and then also demonstrate to our developers that the town is committed in helping and move the developments along. George commented about the sewage disposal, and the assumption is right now we're looking at the Pages Lane property for sewage disposal. This is about a 9-acre parcel that's out going towards the yacht club. This is town-owned land that we see to be developed as a community septic system sewer district, if you will. The town has reviewed this proposed use with DEP and the Water Pollution Control Authority, and both groups have given us approval to proceed with this idea. So we talked to the Board of Selectmen and have a preliminary agreement to do the next step, which is a study to determine the capacity of the site. Looking at a land survey, as I said, it's about 9 acres of ground. We want to take into consideration any environmental issues, wetlands mapping, coastal storm concerns, soil conditions testing, things like that. And then we want to evaluate whether we would do something using more conventional systems, septic systems, or something more on a high-tech basis. And all these things will get into the cost, the benefits, the implications of using either one, and then what permits and approvals are going to be necessary to implement this. And then determining the operating costs and what fee structure, because the assumption is right now that this will be a town sewer district and the users will be paying some cost per gallon for usage of the septic system. The study in itself we've got estimates of about $65,000, and initially we're going to fund this from the land acquisition fund, and then over time as our developments go forward, the fees will be recovered in permits and construction fees, so the town should get all the monies back. And then once we're done with the Pages Lane, or we have it in place, we've had preliminary conversations that this would become another town asset, a park possibly, a ball field, or something that we would then have it cleared off and make use of that and fill another need in the town. At this point, I'd like to ask our developers, owners, to come forward. First, Ken Dardis and Joe Gaudio. They own the Navtech Lumar property. They're Guilford Realty Partners. And if they can just come up and say a few words about their thoughts.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Ken Dardis. My partner Joe is sitting in the crowd as well. We've owned the Navtech property since 2002 and have been through Town Hall and the first selectman, Mr. Bishop, Mr. Mazza, and tried to keep everyone abreast of what was going on that property since we bought it. We've worked very closely with the company, or the two companies that are in there, Navtech and Lumar. And I think we've been a pretty good landlord to a company that's gone through some tough times in the recent cycle. We're very encouraged by the work that is proposed tonight in terms of this zoning overlay. And I think it reflects a reality, not only in Guilford, but in other communities where these older industrial properties may not be the right use for certain locations. And certainly our experience on the Navtech property has been the market will only bear so much rent for these companies nowadays. And the economic constraints of those rents keep properties at a very low use level. And in this case, this property we think could be done a lot better. We've studied a handful of different sites here, different uses, townhomes, condos, apartments. We don't have anything definitive in place. We kind of need to see how this process evolves, but we're committed to working with the town, with your economic development and the other owners in the neighborhood to, you know, do a nice job on this property, create a transit-oriented location, create housing, and hopefully avoid lower-end industrial going forward.
Thank you, Ken. At this point, I'd like to ask Kevin McClellan from Aero Paving to come forward, say a few words. Kevin.
Hello, Kevin McClellan, aka Aero Paving. I guess Ken pretty much summed it all up. I'm an eyesore. I'm open to this overlay. I'm open up to, you know, condos, whatever else brings on this property. Septic, yeah, I mean, I think I have septic on my own site, possibly use that, or Pages Lane, if it gets open to that, we can do that as well. So that's about it. I'm open to suggestion and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And last but not least, Al Jacobs and/or Jim Goodrich. They're going to flip to see who lost or won, I can tell. Jim, okay.
Well, nobody told me I had to say it.
We thought just your pretty face. No, we wanted to say a few.
So that's not going to work for me. Doesn't usually. We're fairly amenable to what's going on, but the issue is going to be for us is going to be septic, since we have no septic on our site at all. And I have one question for the regulation. It states, George stated that there were 6 units available per acre, according to the regulation. But is that consider on-site septic or off-site septic? Shouldn't there be a different density for off-site septic rather than on-site septic? I mean, for instance, we have 2 and 3/8 acres or something to that effect. So we would only be we would only have 12, be able to do 12 units. Whereas George is talking about something like 80% ground coverage is the maximum, which these numbers don't work together. I mean, with 12 units and 2 acres, you're going to have like 10% coverage or something like that. But if you had off-site septic, then you could increase the density and approach, get closer to the higher figure. But if we're only allowed 6 units per acre, that's probably a no-go for us. We have Sunset Storage. My partner Al Jacobs and I own that, and we don't think it's an eyesore. But and it's fully rented, and we're doing pretty well over there. But for us to convert and go to residential, which would be wonderful, but it has to be profitable. And at 12 units for us, that's probably not going to do it. And we would have to make use of the off-site sewage. And my biggest problem with that is getting Pages Lane up and running to be an off-site sewage treatment area. There are so many obstacles. We've been talking about this for about 10 years. 7 years ago, when we started working on our property, we talked to George Kroll, who wanted us to delay a bit because the hope was that it would be coming online and we could do it at that point in time. But of course that never happened. And that land has been there owned by the town for many years, and this has always been in the works. But what does it take to get a DEP permit and to get that up and running? I think for developers, it's really important to know what kind of time frame, legitimate, realistic time frame for that sewage to be up and running. And the developers also are going to need to know what kind of fee structure there's involved. Is the town going to front the cost of the septic and pass it through a referendum or through a bond, and then, or are the developers are going to use it, pay for building this? And I think all these things have to be ironed out. I think giving the options in the district is terrific. I think the overlay zone is a great idea. I'm all for it. But for us, we would need more incentive. We would probably need something better than what's proposed for us to want to convert our units to residential. I don't think 6 units per acre is feasible. So anyway, that's my question, and thank you very much.
We should have had Al come up here instead of you, Jim. I hear what you're saying. Yes. All the questions that you've asked are legitimate ones. The density is something we worked on in terms of, I think, frankly, looking at the larger properties, especially the ones that contain lots of non-buildable area. The units per acre number, the maximum units per acre number, is based on the total parcel size. So you might have a parcel that's half wetlands. You would still be allowed to count that towards your total unit density. You don't have that issue on your property quite as much. So perhaps we should think about a sort of a sliding scale that allows a higher density on a smaller, where you have a smaller parcel size. That might make sense. Right. And your questions about whether or not we can really pull off the sewage disposal opportunity, whether the town's really capable of developing that, is also a good question. We've never done anything like this before, so this is new ground for us. But I think my own opinion is it's time that we do this, and it's time that we do move this forward. It's not only that we have that we consider your site your property unsightly, or even Aero Paving. I mean, Aero Paving is a huge improvement over what that property used to be. The idea is that this transit-oriented development is much more valuable to everyone, hopefully including the property owners, town, if it's developed in accordance with these transit-oriented principles. At least that's my opinion.
If I can just add a couple of comments. You bring up a good point, Jim, as far as the acreage. And I think when George and I were first working on this, we looked at a TS2 zone, right, wrong, or indifferent, but the TS2 zone calls out for 6 units an acre, and we used that as part of our modeling. And we did have some debates because the TS zone does allow 8 units. So I think you're bringing up a good point, that once we have a clear understanding of where the septic is going to be, it might make more sense to allow more density, especially using off-site. And your other comments, I think a lot of the concerns that you're having bringing up, hopefully are going to be answered in the study itself. Understanding the capacity, understanding what the fee structures. We've started talking with other towns that have these kinds of arrangements to get a sense of how they do it, but we're just scratching the surface there. But as part of the scope of the study, that's going to be more clearly defined. I think the assumption was made that the town would put forth the money to put this in place, because we are going to see added tax revenue from this, that it will pay back over time. And then we're also making an assumption that the capacity is going to be greater than the 3 immediate properties we're talking about, that it could be expanded. God forbid somebody had a serious septic problem down in that area, maybe they would tie in, or the area in question that we're talking about is larger, of course, than the 3 immediate properties. And the feeling is that hopefully we're going to have capacity. And we were talking about that earlier today. We have to wait and see. Maybe by the time we get done with the study, we find out that it is only these 3 properties. So a lot of good questions, and hopefully we're going to be able to answer a lot of this as we go forward.
Okay, very good. Speaking of questions, we'll get to those in just a second, but we do have a couple of letters in the file. First one is from John Goucher from the State Office of Long Island Sound Programs, DEP. We reviewed the above referenced proposed amendments and zoning regulations for consistency with the Connecticut Coastal Management Act policies and have no comments for the Planning and Zoning Commission's consideration. In addition, we have a letter from the Regional Planning Commission dated February 19th regarding this application. Thank you for sharing the proposed zoning regulation amendments. The Regional Planning Commission reviewed the proposal at its meeting on Thursday, February 14, 2013. By resolution, the RPCs determined that the proposed zoning regulation amendments do not appear to cause any negative intermunicipal impacts to the towns in the south central region, nor do there appear to be any impacts to the habitat or ecosystem of Long Island Sound. The proposed regulations are consistent with the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development by promoting denser, context-sensitive, mixed-use development in a diversity of housing types and price levels in close proximity to the train station. The Commission may want to consider incorporating standards for bike parking within the proposed district. Please contact us if you have any questions. Finally, we have a letter from Kevin McGee, the environmental planner for the town of Guilford, dated April 13th regarding this application. Proposed zoning amendment to create a Town Center South Overlay Zone District follows the recommendations of the Town of Guilford, Connecticut Municipal Coastal Program approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Board of Selectmen in 2008. The plan recommended the rezoning portions of the I-1 and I-2 districts to steer land use away from traditional industrial uses and toward marine-oriented uses. The plan noted that the rezoning portions of the I-1 and I-2 districts would help protect tidal wetland salt marshes. One concern with redevelopment in this area is the threat of sea level rise. This threat has been identified in the Town of Guilford Community Coastal Resilience Plan Risk and Vulnerability Assessment Report dated September 2012, and also a Municipal Coastal Program report which recommended that the proposed transit-oriented development around the train station be flood disaster resistant and viable under sea level rise scenarios. The regulation changes take into account the need to consider sea level rise and wetland preservation and migration. The construction of the higher density neighborhood would have a potential to affect the adjacent wetlands. These effects are less harmful than the activities allowed under the I-1 and I-2 zoning regulations, except for the increase in impervious surfaces from 40% to 80%. With sound environmental development following low-impact design guidelines required by the Coastal Area Management Regulations and adherence to the existing stormwater regulations, the effects of the development could be mitigated. And that's it. Okay, questions from the Commission? David?
Some, but if other people want to go first.
Yeah, I like that.
Go ahead. Peter, why don't you go first?
Yeah, my question, there must be, obviously the developer must have some type of property like this developed somewhere in the state of Connecticut. If I wanted to see what the end result would be, where would I go? What town? Is there anything like that around?
Ken, do you want to help answer the question from other transit communities you've worked in? Or
We would recommend visit to Stamford, Connecticut, in the south end redevelopment called Harbor Point. And there's a variety of different products that are built and being developed there. We'd be happy to coordinate that visit with you.
Now, is that something you have developed?
No,
Who's the developer of that property?
it's called BLT.
Another town that we've looked at to some extent is Southport, which is part of Fairfield. There is some higher density development in the vicinity of the Southport train station. It's transit oriented. It also has some very high quality, high values associated with it, architecturally and otherwise. And that's another place to look.
With regard to the septic system and this overlay, is it fair to say that from an economic standpoint that if you don't, it isn't feasible to put in a community septic system, that this zone may not be workable?
That's a very good question. If I understand the question, is will the development that's anticipated here occur without the public sewage disposal option being developed? And the answer to that question is some of the properties have the potential with their own on-site sewage disposal to be redeveloped in a manner similar to what the plan is suggesting. The feasibility of doing that is less than if the public option is available, the public sewage option is available. The quality of the development that occurs, in my opinion, will be enhanced by having the sewage disposal system available. Some of the sites can't be developed without some off-site sewage disposal, so you end up with a situation where some of the properties might be developed, but others won't be, or redeveloped, where others won't be. So that leads to a situation where the owners of one property want to redevelop their property. They have the capacity and capability of doing it, but the adjacent property doesn't, and therefore there are questions about whether they'll go forward with their piece, with the other property not likely to be redeveloped. So those are the kinds of questions that are created. So we think for now, because we can do both, we should proceed to do both, and the Board of Selectmen have agreed with that. The Board of Selectmen are basically saying to us that if the Planning and Zoning Commission creates this zoning, we're going to move forward with the sewage disposal, trying to develop the sewage disposal idea. And there's lots of questions that still need to be resolved. There are lots of hurdles that you heard about, some of the questions related to. But yes, we think we can do that, and we think the overall product in terms of the whole neighborhood will be significantly enhanced. Some of the properties can be redeveloped without it, but the end product will not be the same, in my opinion.
My second question is there some way, without having pictures, that you could help me understand what a typical structure, I mean, would it be like, sort of like the town green, in that there could be commercial space on the first floor and apartments or condos or units like that above it?
Sure, that's a possibility that's permitted by the zoning. The zoning is very flexible in that regard. We tried to address that very question in the Town Center South plan, if you'll recall. In fact, we engaged the services to two architectural firms to develop sort of hypothetical residential development plans in order to illustrate to people what residential development might look like on a couple of these sites. You may recall, or if you don't, you can look at the Town Center South plan again. The Aero Pavings property in particular, we had a local architectural firm develop plans for residential development on that property, which included both site plans and kind of schematic architecture. We also had another architectural firm develop plans for the, again, sort of hypothetical plans for the property on the north side of the tracks, the so-called driveway property, including the public works garage in that area. So we did those sort of prototypical designs, if you will, in order to illustrate what we think the type of development might occur. We did not do any plans for the Navtech Lumar property, but you can sort of envision something along those same lines, I think. Again, the hope is, and the desire and the intent and the criteria and the regulation is that this would be high quality design. And because of the economics of this development, it's going to be, it's not going to be inexpensive housing. It's going to be market rate and above, for sure.
And one final question. For the properties that are south of the railroad tracks, given what's been going on with sea levels and stuff like that, is it likely that all of those places would have to be sort of built 12 feet off the ground to prevent there to be, you know, a catastrophe if we had a hurricane?
I would say no, based on what we know right now from the sea level rise projections. All of them are influenced by coastal factors, including sea level rise and increasing storm frequencies. None of the sites are, in my opinion, compromised to the extent that it would not be feasible to do, substantial residential development. It's really too soon to tell in terms of the specific architecture, how elevated they would have to be. The provisions of this regulation, as you heard, are liberal in that regard, so as to allow for the possibility, the likelihood, as you suggest, that some of these subject properties would have to be developed with parking and other structure below grade, as is happening right now with single-family homes, as you can see on Seaside Avenue, for example. For sure, these are going to be, that type of influence is going to affect the architectural design of these projects.
Okay. I just have one quick point. Just a quick question, George. I mean, just wonder, are these regulations at this time premature to come before us? And let me just throw out where I'm trying to go with that. If we had the study completed on the septic system and we knew that it was environmentally viable and financially it would work and people would use it, would the regulations be written one way? And let's say that if we had the study completed right now and they said, no, can't be done because of environmental considerations, or you could do it, but it would be so expensive that the rates you'd need to charge property owners to use it would not be economically viable, well, then we would have changed the regulations to be something different than what we have now. However, if there's only minimal changes that would result, whether when that study's completed either one way or the other, I mean, I would be more comfortable with where we are now. Just wondering if you would envision significant differences if it is viable or if it is not viable than what we have today.
I'll make a comment and then ask George. You bring up a good point, and I think this issue of density is certainly one that maybe have some room or relook at. And we did, I mean, the height issue that we put in here is higher than most, but we were trying to, Tom, your thoughts. In the preliminary conversations we've had with the developers, we assumed there would be some under-level parking, and so that we needed to put a little bit more flexibility. And we did talk to them about the height. It seemed to fit. So, I mean, maybe that would be another area we might have to look at. And it's a sort of a chicken or the egg. I just wanted to comment that because the Board of Selectmen didn't want to make the $65,000 investment if this had no chance of getting approved. So we had to come forward with a document that we thought was pretty close, was workable, and maybe it would require some tweaking, but we can't go to the next step. If there was no way this was going to be approved, then we didn't want to spend that $65,000 either.
Okay.
I think, yes, the short answer to that question is no. I think we do need to adopt this regulation. The limits that are set in terms of density and building coverage and building height are at the upper end. Those limits probably won't be achieved on very many projects unless there's sewage disposal available through this public option. But that doesn't preclude the other development pursuant to this, lower density development pursuant to this on the sites that can provide their own sewage disposal if it should turn out that the Pages Lane property cannot be redeveloped. But we've done enough preliminary investigation of the Pages Lane property for sewage disposal to lead us to believe that it can be done and it will be done. And therefore, the selectmen have assured us that they will move forward, that they want to move forward. They want to make sure that the community, those of us who are here tonight, the community, and as reflected by the Planning and Zoning Commission and representing the interests of the community, are also on board with this concept before they proceed. So that gives rise to the comment that Brian has made.
Thank you. David.
George, I have a number of questions, some of which are specific to the text and some of which are a little bit more global. I mean, when I look at this area, it strikes me that a significant portion of this overlay zone was evacuated during Hurricane Sandy. It's the most recent one.
So many, I can't remember.
Why help me to understand the rationalization of putting high-density residential in an area that is recently proven to be not only prone to flooding, but prone to mandated evacuation. Why this really good idea?
Well, it's just about all of Guilford to the water side of Boston Street was an evacuation zone. This is the center of our community, and it's the area in which we have the transportation and other infrastructure investments. It's part, I think, of our mission as a community to balance the needs of emergency management and to obviate or limit the potentials for having to deal with emergencies. But we have to balance that with the other planning objectives that we have and the other community development goals that we have. And I think what this means is that we have to make sure we have emergency management capability to deal with areas that are subject to flooding. But that doesn't mean that we can't and that we shouldn't preclude the development of those areas, because if we do, we're precluding the development of a substantial part of Guilford.
Well, I won't get into a specific debate with you on that topic. I'm not talking about development in Guilford. I'm asking why high-density residential in an area that is prone to flooding and evacuation. Where are these people going to go on top of the people who already live there? How are we planning for that?
Well, I wouldn't say prone to. Hopefully, these extreme weather events are very rare and are something that we have to respond to on an extremely limited basis. I don't think we can, in my opinion, we can't preclude development in those areas that might be subject to extreme weather events.
Well, I'm going back again. I'm not saying I'm precluding development. I'm asking why recommend this sort of development.
Because the other assets and the other aspects of that community which are supportive of development are there. These are places where people want to live. This is the most desirable. It's not. Just way of putting it. This is a very desirable area for people to want to live. They want to live there because they want to be proximate to the coastal resources, which are extremely desirable from a residential point of view. They want to live there because it's where the infrastructure is, the transportation, for example, and the train station. They want to live there because it's close to the center of town, part of the center of town. It's where the history is. It's where the character is. It's where our historic resources are. So for all of those reasons, that's why this is a highly desirable place to live, and therefore it's a highly desirable place for new development. It has some negatives as well, as you pointed out. So this plan, if you will, balances those, balances the negatives and the positives and attempts to strike an appropriate balance.
And balance is definitely something that I'm trying to get a handle on, because I feel like we seem to be doing many things that are potentially contradictory. We talk about development that's going to respect the potential for sea level rise, and we talk about preservation of tidal wetlands and making provision for wetland migration landward in recognition of sea level rise. But then we state that a high building coverage ratio is generally encouraged, with an impervious coverage not to exceed 80%. How do you reconcile those two points?
That's a good point. One of the things that we would like to see happen as these new sites are developed, and we've been talking to developers specifically about this, where there's a probability or a possibility to encourage salt marsh migration landward, the way we can facilitate that is by obtaining easements and other preservation restrictions on the non-wetland areas that are adjacent to tidal wetlands as part of new developments. So if we allow new development to occur on a site where the development is clustered away from the wetland and the areas that are potentially suitable for sea level rise, for saltwater migration are preserved in order to allow it to happen. If we don't have redevelopment, then we don't have that potential because we're not in a position to implement the standards and the conditions that might be pursuant to the special permit. The impervious surface coverage is a maximum that was suggested for some of the smaller sites. It doesn't, where there's a site, as some of these sites have, substantial areas of tidal wetlands, you know, you're not going to be able to achieve anywhere close to being 80% impervious surface coverage.
And I mean, when I talked about specific, what do you mean by the height language here? It says no building shall exceed 60 feet, so I get that. But then it says building height in excess of 40 feet may be allowed. Does that mean that if it's not required because of increased freeboard, the limit is 40, or is the limit 60?
Right. That's without being totally rigid. That's the idea. That excess of 40 would only be permitted when this freeboard factor is taken into consideration. That's what that language is designed to do, without actually, you know, having a limit that, I mean, a quantitative limit that where a variance is required or something like that. The thought is that 40 feet would be the typical maximum pursuant to a special permit, but that up to 60 would be allowed when the sea level rise or freeboard considerations have to be taken into consideration.
And wrapping my comments or questions up here, and again, I'm going back to the high density residential question that I'm just trying to understand. You talk about a traffic study being required, though it could be waived. In the world of unintended consequences, really there's effectively one way in and out of this part of town, which is Whitfield Street. If you put a significant portion of residential users and or office users going up and down Whitfield Street, are we talking about traffic lights on Whitfield Street at the base of the green or elsewhere? I mean, again, we think this is a great idea, but I'm trying to understand why and what are the, you know, unintended consequences that we haven't been smart enough to think of.
I mean, that's the purpose of that section, to make sure we consider that when we have a specific development. Residential development is, in the scheme of things, a low generator of traffic compared to other land uses. And it's also in consideration of the existing uses, which, while are low traffic generators in terms of total volume, have undesirable types of traffic, especially, particularly trucks. This is the residential development is perceived to be preferable to that. I don't think we're going to have large-scale office use in this neighborhood, which would be a substantial traffic generator. The retail development, which is usually the biggest generator of traffic, is extremely limited as proposed in this regulation. So I think on balance, the traffic considerations are going to be manageable.
My last question is, in terms of the sewer stuff, is there any proposal in mind that existing residential users along Seaside, I know some properties have septic issues, will there be priority given to existing residential users in the neighborhood who might find themselves with a failing septic system, that they would have priority to hook up to the whatever this publicly financed, apparently? I'm not entirely clear why the town is footing the bill on that, but would there be priority for those people as opposed to, would new developers take up all the available capacity and then the people on Seaside?
That's a very good question. That's one of the things that will be addressed in the feasibility study. How we manage the, and what's the decision-making mechanism for determining who gets to tie into the system and who, and when, what the costs are. All those things would be considered as part of this feasibility study. the question of, you know, Brian alluded to the fact that the town may be the developer of the sewage disposal system. I think the way we are thinking of looking at this is that it's an investment in development, and it's a way to encourage investment and the creation of new value that's both taxable and otherwise. So all those things would be taken into consideration.
Okay, any other questions from any of the commissioners?
There's a question. George, could you just give me the size of the parcels that we're talking about mainly, the Lumar, Arrow, and the driveway?
Hang on. The Navtech Lumar is about 26 acres. The Arrow Paving is about 7 acres. And the Sunset Creek is just a little over 2 acres.
Okay, and so the way we're talking about it right now, it's got, I think, 6 residential units per. So that could potentially be a large commercial space on the bottom and the 6 on top. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Per? Okay.
That would be allowed.
And which ones have on-site septic capability right now? I know Sunset does not, but does Arrow and Lumar?
They both have limited septic capability. I don't know exactly to what extent. They do have some, but it's limited.
Any other questions from the commission at this point?
Just a quick,
You just, number 11 here, under 273-253, you mentioned diversity and affordability, but just a little while ago you mentioned that most properties would be market grade or above. I was just trying to reconcile those two statements, what we're talking about here.
It's wishful thinking. Diversity and affordability, those are terms that we, it's something that we would like to see. Diversity is, means different things. Obviously, it's a very big word. Affordability has some very precise definitions. We would like to see some affordable housing development as part of this package. If we elect, the only way we can encourage affordability, or one of the ways we can encourage affordability is allowing higher density. We could encourage it through some kind of public subsidies, but we haven't really gotten into that kind of question yet. We're expecting that the development that occurs will be market rate.
Have we done studies involving, or any preliminary estimates about what that would do to our school costs overall in terms of school-age children compared to tax base?
I may be speaking for the developers. In most of the assumptions that have been made, the target markets are not going to be school-age or families with school-age kids. Some of them are going to be basically 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom kind of units. So we don't think it's going to be a huge number of people that are going to be looking to have school-age kids. We're trying to, when we talked about this, and again, I'm maybe speaking, but in conversations with Kevin, for example, on the Arrow site, he's looking at 1-bedroom, some 2-bedroom units, the more affordable. We'd like to see our 20-somethings and 30-somethings that can't afford to come to Guilford today. Maybe we saw this as an opportunity for that market to be able to come here. And in our early conversations with the Navtech, I mean, that might be a higher price point, but comparable with Fair Street and the places on Broad Street and some of the recent developments that we have in town. I think those would be comparable price points, something like that. So probably capturing more of the older population, like myself, that don't have kids anymore in the school system overall.
But it would attract 20-somethings and 30-somethings, hopefully, that don't have children, that can't currently afford to come to Guilford.
I mean, it would hopefully get them started. I mean, if there's room, we're not trying to exclude them by any means, but right now, I mean, I hear it all the time, that, the 20-somethings, 30-somethings just can't find We don't have enough apartment rentals, affordable apartment rentals. And we think there's going to be a mix in this diversity of housing that would allow that and broaden that from what we have today.
But you think that the families in that same age bracket might be dissuaded because the units would be too small?
I don't know if we've gotten that far to really say, but I mean, if we have the 2-bedroom units, probably would have room for some children, 1, 2, but it, you know, it's probably not a family of 4 or 5 kids in there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just have another question. Right now, if you have on-site septic, you're limited by bedrooms. How does that correlate with doing the sewer system where potentially we're saying the goal is 1 or 2 bedrooms in these? If the builder decided they could potentially do every unit 4 bedrooms, how will you regulate the sewer usage? Do you know where I'm going with that? Sorry if it wasn't clear.
You mean like how are we going to establish some kind of limit in terms of the amount of wastewater a particular property might be able to generate?
Right. Right now it's determined by, you know, if you can fit a 4-bedroom septic in, you can have a 4-bedroom house.
Right.
So if you have sewer usage, potentially these could all be 3- and 4-bedroom condos.
Well, they would all have to be approved by planning and zoning. So at the time the project is approved, the special permit is approved, it would be approved as, you know, X number, you know, be a specific plan approved with X number of 2-bedroom units and 3-bedroom units and so forth. Any change in that would have to come back before planning and zoning, and that would be monitored and evaluated in the context of, you know, all of these criteria, including the capacity of the sewage disposal that they purchased. If there's room to purchase more, and if there's more capacity on the system and all the other criteria are met, they want to add on to the development that's already been approved, then that would be fine. So they would have to satisfy both the planning and zoning objectives and criteria as part of the special permit if they wanted to modify, you know, the development that was approved, and then they would also have to satisfy the sewage disposal capacity limitations, if there are any, in the public system. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think that part of the question was related to using a mechanism of 6 units, but units is not actually limited by how many bedrooms or persons or anything. So if you're talking 26 acres, you're talking 156 units, which could be 156 1-bedrooms, or could be 300 2-bedroom.
Each project, when it was approved, you would, you know, if there was there would be a design for each unit, each dwelling unit, and you would know how many.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that when you do the study for the septic system, first of all, you're going to have to figure out what's the maximum capacity, and then part of that study is going to have to be how does that get allocated out? Is it first come, first serve? Is it who pays the most? Is it otherwise you can, like Kim says, if you can fit a 4-bedroom septic system on the property, you can put 4 bedrooms in. Here it's a lot different, and I think you're going to have to, as part of that study, throw out some systems as to how that capacity is going to be allocated. For example, people like on Seaside Avenue are already having problems, so they get a priority. People in general are having problems today. Do they get the first priority and then anything else, or is there an allocation between the two? So, just a suggestion when you do the study. Okay, before we, Tom, you have one more? Okay.
George, I just want to go back in history. The Town Center South study, as I recall, I didn't read it for this, but as I recall, talked about a vibrant community along the railroad tracks. Is that correct?
Yes, that's one
so
of the...
this is the result of the work that was done by the Town Center South Committee and presented that and was accepted by the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yes.
And the Board of Selectmen.
And the Board of Selectmen, okay.
That's correct.
Okay, is there anybody in the public who would like to ask a question about these 2 applications? Over there, please. If there's multiple folks, we can just come around here and form a line. If not, then we'll just go with this one question.
Sid, did you sign up? my way back.
Okay.
Just don't forget.
Safely the top line, anyone who's following.
Okay.
Sid Gale, 250 Flag Marsh Road. Question, given that this is supposed to be a transit-oriented development, has the town government made any commitment to moving the Public Works Garage, which has been recommended in 3 reports, the Transportation Plan, the Town Center South Report, and the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Plan, for various reasons? That's 6.5 acres of land. That would be a critical stimulus to the redevelopment of other privately owned properties around that area. It's the area most immediately adjacent to the railroad tracks, and it would seem critical for a variety of reasons, including septic planning, to know what the town's intentions are for that piece of property.
Brian, George, anyone?
I mean, I'll take a shot at that. First of all, the area of where the Public Works area is put into the overlay zone. So, I mean, we are trying to think about that. Public Works and frankly the A&W sanitation, those areas are part of the overlay zone. But, you know, this is phases and it's going to take time. We're trying to do the first thing that maybe you have to be opportunistic. These first opportunities are here, and we're trying to address them in the short term, recognizing those other areas are covered by the overlay zone. But we have not made any recommendations to move that at this point in time. Let's try to get through the first phase of this, and then we'll see if more demand comes forward that would need those areas.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, let me ask, is there anyone in the public wishing to speak in favor of this application? Sir?
Harry Haskell, 15 Union Street. I'm the president of the Guilford Preservation Alliance and would like to read a letter on behalf of the Board of Directors. We strongly support the proposed amendment to the zoning code relating to the Town Center South Overlay District, as well as the proposed study to determine the feasibility of installing a community septic system in the district. Both moves are consistent with the town's well-considered policy as set forth in our plan of conservation and development to encourage environmentally sustainable, mass transit-oriented residential and commercial development in the neighborhood between the town green and the marina. The special permit requirements stipulated in the proposal before you this evening will give the town the ability to meaningfully guide future development in this environmentally sensitive area while ensuring that the rights of current property owners are protected. The economic, environmental, and aesthetic benefits of such a policy will accrue to all residents of Guilford. The GPA commends the town staff for their work in implementing the recommendations of the Town Center South Committee and urges you to accept their proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Sir?
Joe Newton, 423 New Whitfield Street. First, a disclaimer. I served on the Town Center South. When I started, I had a full head of hair. My beard was black, so that's how long ago it was. This is a winner. This is really a no-brainer, this overlay. Someone on the board deals with real estate. All you have to do is look at property along the rail track in Fairfield County where you have marine facilities. High demand for housing at top dollar. And Guilford is now considered the new Fairfield. I think it's a win-win situation, and the board should approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Sir?
Sid Gale, 250 Flag Marsh Road, for those who may have forgotten. I was the first chairman of the Town Center South Committee, and I speak in support of the proposed regulations, but with qualification, and my qualifications are perhaps more important than my support of the regulation. I believe that as worded, the regulation can be modified to deal with certain unknowns as they become clearer over time. But I also empathize with the commission member who wondered if we weren't putting the cart before the horse. Some of the questions clearly make the case that until the resiliency study is complete, you do not know how much you can do with available property and how you're going to build on the property that's available. And that's a major impact on the issue of your septic capacity or your waste management capacity. Furthermore, out of the resilience study, which is not limited to Town Center South, you'll have a sense of the town's greater exposure to the needs for greater waste management in areas where septic systems outside of Town Center South may also be subject to compromise by subsurface sea level rise, inundation. You may have areas like that in Indian Cove, and I'm sure many other areas along our coast. That was recognized in 2004 when the Town Center South Committee did a workshop for municipal officials to determine what the implication of sea level rise might be. We learned a lot about the possible risks at that time, but we haven't resolved many of the questions that we learned about at that time, 9 years ago. And I think that it behooves you to get a better handle on that, to see what the resiliency study brings forward before you try to grapple with some of the very valid questions that you've raised here. Yes, we may become the Fairfield County of, the new Fairfield County of Connecticut, but be advised that Fairfield County has, for the most part, municipal waste facilities that we and most of the East Shore do not. In recent public workshops on the subject of transit-oriented development, it was made clear that there are two factors which are critical to an effective TOD. I mean, you can hang the label of TOD on anything you want, but to have a true TOD, you have to have density of development, number one. And number two, in order to have density of development, you have to have waste treatment process other than same-site septic, which we don't have, which most of the East Shore doesn't have, which is one of the problems in getting the state of Connecticut to invest more heavily in extended transit for the East Shore, because many of the towns either are philosophically opposed to the necessary density, according to TOD orthodoxy, or they don't have the facilities at this time to support the necessary waste management. Those are realities. Those are preconditions for the reality that will come out of this proposed zoning amendment. And I am particularly concerned that the study of waste management will look only to the immediate needs of Town Center South, possibly without the benefit of the resiliency study, and not consider the possible broader needs of the town as a whole. And that would be a serious mistake. We can't redo that one. We'd better get it right the first time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Yes, sir.
William Mack, 382 Old Whitfield Street. I am actually going to speak in favor of this. As a resident, I've been a long-time resident, and I've observed over the last couple of decades the conversion of this area of town from industrial, old, antiquated industrial sites to residential use. Most of the houses, a lot of the houses are being improved, rebuilt. It's a vital residential area, and of course I can walk right down the street and get on the train. And so I circulated a petition a couple of years ago, and I got about 150 of the neighbors there petitioning the Board of Selectmen to implement the Town Center South plan, which they're now in the process of doing. They simply need the zoning support to accomplish that, and so I hope that the commission will support this. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Anyone else wishing to make a comment in favor of the application? Is there anyone who would like to speak against the application? Okay, one more opportunity for questions, either the commission or from the audience. Okay, hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and we will move on to the next one on the agenda related to the billboard. Is the applicant able now to make their presentation? Very good. Please come forward. Thank you.
I haven't saw it, no. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were reading it, actually. This is from... No, it's all other stuff. This is all letters. But I want the gas station. There's not... They won't gas station. And they're all the usual suspects. Well... I didn't see your name.
There was another packet of the letters that was on that end. You guys found that?
They got passed around there?
If you circulated, we have one.
Tom was sitting on it, apparently.
Yeah.
It took a long time to read all those.
It's a slow reader, I understand.
Well, we'll get to the letters. Sir, are you ready to begin?
Ready when you are.
Okay.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Timothy Lee. I'm an attorney with the address of 388 Orange Street in New Haven.
Excuse me, can everybody hear?
What is your last name?
Lee, L-E-E.
I think that's the mic that's actually hooked up to the PA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, once again, my name is Tim Lee. I represent the applicant, who is CBS Outdoor, Inc. They're here tonight to propose a new regulation to the Guilford zoning regulations. The purpose of the regulation would be to allow the conversion of an existing billboard sign into an LED billboard sign. Currently, billboards are not an allowed use under the Guilford zoning regulations. There's no provision in the regulations which allow billboards. However, CBS does own 4 billboard faces by the diner at exit 59 that exist by virtue of being a pre-existing non-conforming use. They were originally erected in the 1930s, which predated the zoning regulations in Guilford. The regulation itself, the purpose of the regulation is to allow the billboard to be converted to an LED sign. In consideration for hopefully getting the permission to do that, CBS would be willing to eliminate 2 of the billboards, thereby reducing an existing nonconformity. And if I'll read the regulation to you, we can then go through the regulation itself. The regulation reads, existing non-conforming billboard signs may be replaced by LED signs subject to special permit approval in accordance with Article 10 if, 1, the area of said billboard is reduced by a minimum of 50%, 2, the LED sign content change occurs no more frequently than every 8 seconds, and 3, the sign is in compliance with all rules and regulations of the State of Connecticut Department of Transportation in effect at the time of the adoption of this regulation. We've also proposed a definition of billboard because in preparing for this regulation and meeting with a subcommittee of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we realized that there was no definition of billboard in the Guilford zoning regulations, so we figured as long as we're proposing this regulation, we'd also propose a definition of billboard. So the application also includes a definition of billboard, which would be defined as any object, device, display, or structure which is used for attracting attention to any use, product, service, or activity not conducted, sold, or offered on premises where such advertising sign or billboard is located. So that, in sum and substance, is the proposal we're making to amend the Guilford zoning regulations. Now, it's a bit of a trade-off between CBS and the town of Guilford. In consideration for being allowed to convert one of our signs to an LED sign, we are agreeing that we will eliminate 2 signs, thereby allowing the town to reduce the existing nonconformity that exists. So right now, at the property where the diner is located, there are 4 signs, 2 facing in each direction. If this proposal were to pass, we would then come before the Planning and Zoning Commission with a special permit application. That special permit application would include the elimination of 2 of the signs, and we'd keep the 2 faces which face in the easterly direction and convert one of those signs into an LED sign. I passed out earlier to the commission a packet of information. That information includes a blue page which contains some information regarding CBS Outdoor, discusses what CBS Outdoor is. It's an international company, owns over 400,000 billboards throughout the country and throughout the rest of the world. They're certainly familiar with the operation of billboards, and they operate a number of LED billboards. Towards the end of that package, the middle of the package, there's an artist's rendition of what the signage would look like if it were to be approved by the commission. The eastbound, the signs visible in the eastbound view would be eliminated, and the signs visible from the westbound view would be converted into 1 static sign and 1 LED billboard. We had an opportunity to discuss this regulation with the subcommittee of the Planning and Zoning Commission before we submitted the application to the entire commission for its consideration. During the meeting with the subcommission, there were a number of issues and questions raised by the board. The board was concerned, or pardon me, the subcommittee was concerned about whether LED billboards posed a risk to traffic. And the answer is no. LED billboards don't increase or create a traffic hazard. The National Highway Safety Administration has done studies of this. LED billboards have been in existence now for going on 7 or 8 years. And based on the studies in effect, the National Highway Safety Association has come to the conclusion that LED billboards pose no threat to the public health, safety, and welfare, or cause a distraction to drivers. The second question, or one of the other questions that was raised, was how often do these signs change? One of the benefits to having an LED sign is that we can change the advertising content every so often. The state of Connecticut regulates the flip, as they call it, the number of times the sign can change. And under the state statute, the sign can change up to every 6 seconds. We are proposing in this regulation that the sign content change no more than every 8 seconds. So we're a little bit slower than what the state statute allows. Finally, when we met with the subcommittee, they were concerned about potential changes to LED technology or state statute in effect. So what we did is we we proposed the regulation to state that the sign, if approved, would be in compliance with the regulations of the state of Connecticut currently in effect right now. That way, if it got approved, the commission could be sure to know what they got. They could see the sign today, they look at the sign today, they know that's a sign that's going to be there today, tomorrow, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, that all of a sudden it's not going to end up looking like Las Vegas or Times Square or anything like that. They're going to have an idea of what the sign looks like and will look like on into the future. There's no question that it's a benefit to CBS to be able to have an LED sign at the property. As you can imagine, with a current billboard, they call the static billboards, you change the message once every 30 days or so, and you're limited to one advertiser during that time period. With an LED sign, we're able to accommodate a number of different entities in advertising because we can flip the content every 8 seconds under this proposed regulation. So instead of being limited to one particular advertiser or client, we can have 3 or 4 advertisements going on in a continual loop. And that's certainly a benefit to CBS in one regard. They get more advertisers. But it's also a benefit to people who want to advertise on the sign, because the end result for potential advertisers is that it's a lot less inexpensive for them, or pardon me, a lot less expensive for them to advertise on an LED sign than it is to advertise on a static sign, because they can share the cost burden with 3 or 4 other advertisers instead of having to bear the entire cost of a sign all by themselves for a period of 30 days. And that's important because with regard to this particular sign at exit 59, down by the diner, CBS has found that that sign has been primarily used to advertise local businesses that are here in Guilford. The sign has in the past housed advertisements for the Guilford Fair. It's housed advertisements for Bishop's Orchards. It's housed advertisements for other local establishments. So once again, there's a benefit to CBS. There's also a benefit to residents of the town of Guilford and businesses in the town of Guilford who have chosen to use billboard as a form of advertising their businesses. Final benefit to the town is that CBS makes the LED billboards available to public agencies such as the town and the state. If there's an Amber Alert, something like that, that information will get conveyed through the sign, license plates, cars, that type of thing. So it's a very effective way to convey emergency information to the general public in such a way that you can't do with a static sign that remains the same for 30 days at a time. We think that the application itself poses a reasonable compromise between the rights of CBS and also the town's interest in kind of preserving the historic character of the town of Guilford. Guilford's a beautiful town. The town green is beautiful. A lot of areas are beautiful in the town, but the fact remains that this property is located on Route 1, and we're now here in the 21st century, and what we're just looking to do is try to maintain the technology and bring the technology up to the 21st century. If this regulation doesn't get approved, the billboards are still going to exist. There's still going to be 4 billboards there. They are there by virtue of a pre-existing non-conforming use. The town can't do anything to take the billboards away. The only way to eliminate or reduce the billboards is if the applicant voluntarily agrees to reduce the number of signs or take the signs down. By virtue of this regulation, CBS would agree to eliminate 2 of the signs. Therefore, the town gets the benefit of a reduction in 2 billboard signs, 2 signs which could never go back up because billboards are not permitted under the Guilford zoning regulations. In consideration for taking the 2 signs down, CBS would be allowed to convert one of the signs to LED, subject to special permit approval by the commission. In your packets, I don't need to go through it all, I have enclosed a copy of the state statute and the state regulations which govern billboards. I've also included some information from the National Highway Safety Administration showing that billboards do not, or LED billboards do not pose a threat to or distract drivers. And finally, I've submitted a study from Virginia Tech University that indicates that LED billboards, once again, do not pose a traffic hazard to drivers on the road. If the commission has any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them.
Okay, thank you. The question I have is, it does say, it's paragraph 3 here, in effect at the time of the adoption of this regulation.
Right.
Why not in effect at the time of the application being filed?
It doesn't matter to me, quite frankly. Once again, that language arose from a meeting we had with the subcommittee addressing signs. And like I said, they wanted to be sure that if they approved this regulation, they knew what the sign was going to look like now and 5 years down the road. To the extent it said at the time we submit the application or at the time it got approved, that wouldn't necessarily matter to us. That was something to try to give the commission comfort that they knew what they were buying, so to speak.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
I have questions.
Okay.
The picture here that you show the approach from Madison eastbound, can you just explain to me the trees that are blocking it or growing up in front of it, are those actually within the easement, and does CBS have the authority to trim those?
CBS does have authority to trim those bushes if they interfere with the sign, the vision of the sign. However, under our proposal, those signs would be eliminated.
Is that in the easement, original easement? Because it looked like those trees are on somebody else's property.
They're view easements that they have. CBS has a view easement.
Can you provide evidence of that easement to us?
I can't tonight, but I can.
Okay.
If the commission were to keep the hearing open, I could.
Okay, could you just clarify how many towns CBS is in and how many of those towns where you are actually allow LED?
Yep. CBS is currently in about 65 towns in Connecticut. LED signs are now currently in Hartford, New Haven, and New Britain, and I understand those are cities as opposed to Guilford. CBS is also looking to propose LED signs in some other towns which may be more similar in nature to Guilford, such as Wallingford. We've met with Wallingford regarding LED signs, and they said that LED signs would be permissible in Wallingford.
Are they in settings similar to this on a secondary road, or are they on highways?
The billboard in Wallingford that we were discussing with the town of Wallingford would be on Route 5, which I guess would be a road that would be similar to the Boston Post Road.
Thank you. And then just a question, if somebody from the town, either George or Reggie, can just say where this actually would impact. Is it only this parcel, or are there other parcels in town? Those are the only ones that have a non-conforming billboard?
What about across the
No.
street?
There's one, Joe Milano has one, and the Foncello family owns one. And then there's another one up on the hill that belongs to Bishop's Orchards.
Thank you.
I think that's a good question to try to, I think CBS signs are maybe in more of a unique position to be able to be converted to LED signs than some of the other signs you referenced, because CBS at this location has 4 billboard signs, and under the proposed regulation, we'd be entitled to convert a sign to a billboard if we reduce 50% of, or eliminate 50% of the square footage of existing signage. If somebody has one small billboard, they're not likely to come before you and ask to convert it to LED because their sign would be so small, it'd be almost like watching, TV or big screen TV or something. It just wouldn't be in there worthwhile for them to do that.
Clarify one thing.
I think the sign that Reggie's referred to, that Bishop's has, it looks like a billboard, but it's actually an on-premises sign. It advertises Bishop's products, and it's on their property. It's an illegal sign, but it's not a billboard under this definition. So therefore, it would not be, as I understand it, it could not be converted to LED. since it doesn't meet the definition of billboard. The one that's on the Fonticello property faces I-95, and I guess that would meet the definition of a billboard. And the Milano one definitely does as well. But as Attorney Lee said, they're both fairly small.
Any other questions from the commission at this point?
I have.
Yeah. Sure, Tom.
I'd like to know a little bit more about the technology itself.
Okay.
You could change the advertisement according to this proposed regulation every 8 seconds.
Correct.
When you change advertisements, is there a fixed amount of illumination from the light that doesn't change no matter what the advertisement is?
I'm not sure I understand, but let me see if I can answer it.
Well, I think because,
let
me just say it looks like one of the issues would be that this thing might flash more, it might move more, it might do a lot of things that a fixed sign doesn't do, even though the fixed sign may be illuminated.
Right.
So how do these work so that they don't look, for example, they're not obnoxious? What are they like at night? Can the luminosity be varied based on the time of day? That sort of thing.
Yes. The last question first. The luminosity could be changed during the course of the day. The signs are operated remotely from computers at CBS. During the day, the sign may be a little bit brighter because you need brighter signs with the daylight in order to attract an eyeball. And the signs would be lowered at night because you don't need to compete with the sun to grab eyeballs. At night, the sign would be equivalent to the brightness of a street light, so to speak. That's about the level of brightness that we're talking about. In terms of the sign itself, under the state regulations, the sign is not allowed to flash. You're not allowed to scroll anything. It stays static, and then when you change to a different advertisement, it kind of just fades to black, and then the other sign goes up. So it's not, Las Vegas where you're going to see flashing lights, you're going to see moving lights around the sign. That is not prohibited, that is not permitted by the state regulations or the federal regulations regarding billboards. So what you'd see is the advertisement, the visual will then kind of fade to black, and then a new visual would come up.
The second question I have is, you said there's a potential for amber alert and silver alert.
Correct.
How does that function? And would it be possible, for example, for the town of Guilford, if there was an emergency, for the town of Guilford to have the ability to announce that emergency on that sign?
The answer is yes, and I have a representative from CBS in the audience tonight, and I just wanted to confirm with him that would in fact, yes, but the town would have access to be able to run an emergency message on the sign.
I think that's it for now.
David? I do have some questions.
Please, go ahead.
I just want to understand, I'm looking at the rendition westbound, meaning coming from Madison. Why is there a reason one of the screens is black?
I think that's the LED sign. The answer is when you come from Madison into Guilford, you would be presented with two billboard faces. One would be LED, one would be static. When you leave Guilford,
is that in the proposal? Am I just missing reading the proposal that only half the sign is going to be?
Well, there are two signs on the other side.
I thought they were.
It's not in the proposal.
Help me to understand. I'm looking at the
I
your eastbound existing, meaning heading towards Madison, shows the billboards, and then rendition eastbound after, and apparently I'm now looking at the back of the LED sign. Right?
Those are
right.
The back of signs.
Okay, the back of signs. And so westbound heading back from Madison, I'm going to be looking at two LED signs or one LED sign?
No, you'd be looking at one LED sign and one static sign.
And is that reflected in the regulation, and I'm just not?
It's not. What the regulation says is that we'd be entitled to come before the commission and ask for a special permit to convert a sign to LED if we eliminated 50% of the square footage of the billboard. So right now, what I'm asking the commission to do is just propose the enabling regulation that would allow us to come forward. If the commission approved the amendment to the regulation, we would then come before you with a special permit. At that point in time, we'd show you the specific application.
And would we be looking at 2 LED signs for westbound view, or 1?
1. You would be looking at 2 signs, 1 static sign and 1 LED sign.
You would be entitled under the regulations to apply for a special permit to have both of them LED. You're just you just think now you only want one of them.
At the committee level, you talked about 2 signs on the westbound view.
Westbound.
Meaning coming from Madison.
Right.
We would see 2 signs because the backside, if you will, would no longer have any signs on it. And I thought those were your 50% reduction was getting rid of the eastbound view and just preserving the westbound view and having 2 LED signs.
Okay, I think we're saying the exact same thing, except instead of 2 LED signs, we're only going to have 1 LED sign.
Why are you only going to have 1? You seem like such a great idea. It sounded like it was great for Guilford. It sounded like it was great for advertisers. Why not 2, why 1?
If the commission thought it was great, I'm sure CBS, I could talk CBS into putting 2 LED signs up there. I'm not looking to be flip. I just think that...
I'm just trying to understand what the... if the regulation that you're asking for allows 50% reduction allows you to then have LED signs, and the facts on the ground right now are that you have 4 signs. If we adopt this regulation, there's nothing that would prevent you, unless you're telling me otherwise, from coming in tomorrow and saying, oh, guess what, we've changed our mind. We do want 2 LED signs, in which case this packet that you're submitting is misleading at the best.
Sure. We're not trying to be misleading. What CBS wants to do is eliminate the 2 faces on one side, convert 1 sign to LED and 1 sign to static. To the extent we need to tinker with the regulation to give you comfort that that's all we want to do, we're happy to do that. I think the commission always has discretion to kind of grant us less than what we've asked for, and certainly we're not, to the extent the commission needed comfort that that's what we wanted to do, we could tweak the regulation to ensure that we could not come back here looking for
So your representation to the commission, the public, is you're only going to go with 1, and if we wanted to tweak the regulation to just show 1, you wouldn't be opposed to that?
Correct. Our proposal was 1 static, 1 LED.
75% reduction?
No, we'd have to
figure
it out.
All right.
I get the gist of what we're being asked to do.
The only places I've seen these LED billboards, when you mention Hartford, New Haven, and New Britain, have been along limited access highways, interstates. And if there are 169 towns, you're telling me 166 don't allow them at all, and the 3 that do have populations north of 100,000, and the signs are located along interstates?
No, I'm not quite saying that. I'm saying that of the 169 towns in Connecticut, CBS is located in 65 of those towns.
Right.
In those towns, right now, LED billboards are located in the major cities. I'm not going to try to equate Guilford to New Haven or Hartford or New Britain.
You were equating it with Wallingford earlier, which I thought was an interesting.
Well, I like both towns, so. I think Wallingford has a quaint downtown. I think Guilford has a quaint downtown. They also have, a major commercial thoroughfare on Route 1 and Route 5. So I do think that there may be some similarities in that regard.
This is relevant also just in the context, you said that the National Highway Traffic Safety Commission found no risk to traffic from these LEDs, but I'm wondering if those studies were done in the context, again, of billboards high in the sky, as opposed to relatively low along a road like Boston Post Road. And what's probably most concerning to me is the location in terms of the view heading back from Madison. You're at the fork of Boston Street and Boston Post Road with a flashing light, and cars stopped taking left. Near and dear to my heart, bicycles stopped in the middle of the road sticking their arm out, waiting for eastbound traffic to clear up. And I have, notwithstanding a study done on interstate highways, I have a vision of somebody driving back from Madison. The sign, obviously, if it's going to work, presumably you design it so that it catches people's attention.
Right.
And if it catches people's attention and you're earning your money by the advertising money you're taking from your clients, it means that somebody's looking at that sign and not looking on the road. And I'm particularly concerned about the nexus of an angled road with a flashing traffic light and now an LED sign that scrolls. And if you're coming from Madison, you can see that sign for quite a distance, actually. When you talk about it scrolling 8 seconds, you might see 2 or 3 or 4 cycles. And I'm just concerned by what reassurance can you give us that, in fact, given this location, it's not going to represent a hazard to traffic?
I'm about to hand you quite a bit of reassurance. There have been a number, as I referenced, that there have been a number of studies by the National Highway Traffic Association and by Virginia Tech, among others. On the first page of the packet I'm going to give you right now, they analyzed billboards for their safety factors, and they considered digital billboards and viewed them along interstates in Ohio, local roads in Rochester, New York, and Albuquerque, along local roads and expressways in Reading, and along interstates and local roads in Richmond, Virginia. So the studies do include a combination of interstates and local roads as well, in terms of trying to determine if these are a nuisance or a hazard. So I'll submit this package of information to the Commission for its review. Now, what the information also says is that the static billboard, or it says any billboard grabs a driver's attention for 1 second. And that's true whether it's a static billboard or whether it's an LED billboard. The fact it's an LED billboard doesn't grab the driver's attention for more than a static billboard does. So there's no difference in impact to a driver's safety between a static billboard and a LED billboard.
Well, but just when I look at a static billboard, by definition, it doesn't change.
Correct.
When I look at a LED sign that changes, I may look at it and see one ad, and then could be 8 seconds, could be less than half a second. All of a sudden, it's going to be a different sign. So
that's right.
Presumably, I'm going to be a little more distracted by the fact that there are now at least 2 different signs that I'm looking at. I don't want to get into a debate too specific about that.
I understand the argument. I think the literature that I've submitted says differently, but I certainly understand your perspective.
Right. I mean, the question I had was, is there a study or in the material that you submitted that compares static to LED, whether they're more or less of a safety concern?
The answer is yes. Okay. And it's been studied by both the national government and the state government. LEDs first came into existence on federal highways, so the federal government took an interest in making sure that they weren't imposing unsafe conditions upon drivers. So they studied the impact that an LED billboard would have, and the studies that we've submitted show that it doesn't distract a driver any more than a static billboard would. And furthermore, their studies indicate that billboards don't distract drivers and cause accidents any more than anything else. So I think what they've done is they've analyzed areas of roads where they have billboards and areas of roads where they don't have billboards, and the end result was that there's no increase in traffic in areas where billboards are located than where billboards aren't located.
Okay, well that's what I'm trying to find out. I mean, they are there today, so for better or for worse, they're there. Just trying to make sure that if you do change it, it's not increasing anything, and there's some scientific studies that can back that up.
Yes.
Okay, we'll take a look at them.
One quick question I have is the fact that billboards in the town of Guilford is a non-conforming use. Correct. So if you had an approval for one LED billboard, what kind of assurance do we have that the static billboard is going to be removed?
Because I don't think we could pull a permit. I mean,
because it's not conforming to start with.
If the regulation gets approved, it's in the books, we can then come before the commission for a special permit. If the commission approves a special permit, then we're going to go to planning, zoning, get a zoning permit, and get a building permit in order to build the sign. The town's not going to let us power up the sign until we take down the static signs. So I'm not trying to throw the ball in the town's court. It's an enforcement issue, but the town's not going to let us get started gearing up the electrical billboard, you know, plugging it in, letting it run if we haven't taken down the 2 static billboards.
Yeah, 'cause, I'm just wondering, like, when you look at Wallingford and some other towns where you have LED, do you have both static and LED basically side by side?
We've met with the town in Wallingford, and we have a proposal going forward. We don't have a LED sign yet in Wallingford. We're in the kind of the same stage we are with you. That would just be one a standalone LED sign. It's not next to.
But at other locations in Connecticut, do you have static next to LED?
The answer is yes.
So why didn't you take the static down?
Because in some of those towns, billboards may have been a permitted use, and therefore we didn't need to take the static down.
I'm just wondering, from the marketing perspective, if you have a static next to a billboard, you would get more play, more exposure,
If you had
because you have 2 different types.
Maybe. And I can't tell you why CBS in this, the end result for CBS would be to have 1 static and 1 LED. I'm not sure why they want that as opposed to 2 LEDs, but I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, but somebody may.
Just to speak to that, CBS Outdoor.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, just as my, my name is Joseph Lasparo. I'm a representative of CBS Outdoor. And the reason why we actually have a very similar situation that we were just approved in Bristol. We have and I believe it's right in the packet as well, where we have a static face billboard, and we, directly alongside of it, we converted an LED billboard. The reason why we have chosen, and it seems to come up frequently, hey, why don't we want to do 2, is because as a responsible resident of the community, CBS Outdoor doesn't want to, wants to be very mindful and respectful of the community. And it's clear that most communities are very concerned about the impact. What we're asking to do is to provide a need for our customers. Our customers want to be in the town of Guilford. Like the gentleman said earlier, it's the new Fairfield. People want to be a part of it. There's a demand here. And that's why, but while satisfying that demand, we also want to be mindful and respectful of the people within the community and locate it in such a strategic place that the impact to the residents of the community is limited, while still being able to address the advertising needs of not only the people within the town, but also the people that are looking to get a foothold and reach the people in the town.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Sure.
How would 2 billboards be less respectful than 1? If one is respectful, how do you make that delineation that 2 would somehow be an affront?
Just so I understand your question, at the present location, there is 4 billboards.
Oh,
And what we're
I was referring more to the situation where you have a static billboard next to an LED that you were just discussing, where you said that you wanted to be mindful and respectful of another community. What made you decide that converting the second static billboard to LED would be less respectful of that community?
Well, let's face it. Greed isn't a good thing. You know, we're looking to, like I said, address a need of our advertisers, but still being mindful. If we chose to do 2, we felt, quite honestly, that was going to be less received.
Along with Joe was saying, we understand that we're here today asking for amendment to the zoning regulations, and we need your permission to amend the zoning regulations. We're not here asking for something that's as of right. So we kind of have to try to make it palatable to you, and hence the trade-off between eliminating the 2 signs. And in making that trade-off, I think CBS thought that, hey, 1 LED sign is okay, we'd like 2. 2 may be seen as being piggish. Let's stick with 1, and I think that was just all part of the trade-off.
I understand, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the commission before we go to the public?
Oh, go ahead, Dave. No, my question is, are we picking up the definition of a billboard separately?
At the same time.
Right,
We're hearing both.
do you think?
You mentioned, I'm trying to get a handle on the benefits to Guilford here. And because again, at the committee level and then hearing you talk, it sounds an awful lot like this change is uniquely applicable to your property and your property only, which brings up the somewhat old and outdated phrase of spot zoning, but in this case it really kind of captures the essence, because spot zoning is applicable or beneficial only to one particular property and contrary to the comprehensive plan. And right now our zoning regulations don't allow LEDs anywhere. And your testimony here and at the committee level was, we've crafted this so it really only applies to us. Back to where is this a benefit to Guilford? And when you talked about local businesses, you're not going to restrict the advertisers only to Guilford-based businesses. And when I went past the sign recently, there was 2 law firms, neither the same law firm actually, no Guilford offices. There was a bicycle shop not located in Guilford. And there was a 4th sign, and even though I really tried to remember what it was, I've completely forgotten. But it was also not a Guilford business. So if the benefit is I get to drive by and think of other businesses in other towns, then I guess that's a benefit to Guilford. But tell me how this is helping Guilford.
Well, I think there's a number of ways. First, to take your example of the bike shop. Sure, the bike shop you're referring to, I think it's probably Zane's, and they're in Brantford, but I do think that Zane's bike shop serves Guilford, the clientele in Guilford. I think there's a number of residents in Guilford who are interested in biking, see a sign for Zane's and said, let's go to Zane's. It serves Zane's interest because they get customers. It serves the residents of Guilford because they know that there's a bike shop 1 town over that they can go and buy a bike. In terms of consistency with the comprehensive plan and development, one of the goals of zoning is to reduce a nonconformity. And as it exists right now, you have 4 billboard signs that exist at this property, and they exist by virtue of being a nonconforming use. Under the proposed regulation, we are proposing to eliminate 2 of those billboard faces. We are therefore reducing the nonconformity consistent with the comprehensive plan. We're going from 4 signs to 2 signs.
You're going from 4, let me just clarify that, make sure I understood. We're going from 4 static signs to 2 static signs, or to something else? I think you know it's something else. So let's don't say apples when it's apples, oranges. It's 4 static signs to 1 static sign,
1 LED sign, and 1 static
illuminated
sign.
LED
but once
sign
we eliminate
changes
those
every year.
once we eliminate those signs, no matter what it goes to, we cannot put up those 2 signs. So those 2 signs are gone under the proposed regulation.
We're going from 4 signs to 2 signs, one of which is static and one of which is LED.
Correct.
We'll take up the merits of that later. That's the answer to the question, right?
Correct. In terms of the other benefits, there are a number of local advertisers. As I mentioned, the Guilford Fair currently advertises on those billboards. Bishop's Orchards advertises on those billboards. The Diner advertises on those billboards. So there are a number of local, Subway in Guilford advertises on those billboards. There are a number of local businesses that advertise there. Thirdly, it may be a benefit to residents or businesses in Guilford that don't advertise right now. As I mentioned before, with LED signs, you can spread the cost of advertising over a number of different entities. Instead of one entity having to spend a lot of money to advertise on a static sign for 30 days, you're stuck with one advertiser. That costs more money to the advertiser. With a static sign, you can have a number, 3, 4, 5 advertisers there, and that they can share the burden of the cost of advertising while still getting their message out to the general public. So I think under that scenario, that will serve the residents of Guilford. The proposed faces are going to face, you're going to see when you come from Madison into Guilford, we're limiting the other faces, which will then not be seen by the residents on Boston Street over there. So once again, that's an improvement to the existing condition for the residents that are over there. And I think all in all, it does have certain beneficial aspects to Guilford.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? If not at this...
I have questions about the definition.
All right, why don't we take that?
No one else has questions about the definition?
Lay it on us.
I have some questions about the definition of a billboard. I mean, when I know a billboard when I see one, and to me it's a big sign.
Mm-hmm.
So could you help me understand what object would be a billboard?
It was trying to keep it broad. I agree. You know a billboard when you see it, and it's a big sign structure. We didn't want to limit it to, just that. So, you could have, well, theoretically, you could have, well, you know what? You have the water tank up there, the Connecticut water tank, right by the diner. And then right now they have an advertisement for the water company because it's their tank, so it's not an off-site advertisement. But theoretically, you could have a structure such as the water tower, and somebody could advertise that. The diner could put an advertisement theoretically on that water tower. It would be an object or structure. It wouldn't necessarily be a sign as you know it when you see it, billboard. So I think that's the kind of thing it was looking to address.
You would fall into it if it was non-water tower, non-water company use that you tried to advertise on it.
So,
yeah, I'm not saying it's a perfect analogy. I'm just...
No.
Okay. So as I understand this definition, you're saying that the only way it's defined as a billboard if I own a business and I put up a large sign that conforms with the zoning in Guilford, it's not a billboard.
If you're advertising your business at your property, it's not a billboard. If you're advertising some other business on your property, then it would be a billboard under that definition.
Even if it was 2 by 3?
If you're under this regulation, yes, because you're advertising something which is not sold, produced, or conducted on your premises. Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go to the public right now and ask if there's any questions from the public. Shirley, please, and if there's anyone else, remember this is just a question, not a statement for or against. If you could just line up, and we'll try to take these one at a time in order.
Shirley Gerioni, 199 Whitfield Street. In the proposed amendment, it says, the area of said billboard is reduced by a minimum of 50%. So you said you had 4 billboards. So the one billboard that's going to be an LED, that would be cut in half?
No.
Well, what do you mean by 50% cut?
Right now we have 4 billboards. If this regulation gets approved, we'd eliminate 2 of the billboards and only have 2 faces. So right now there are 4 faces. We'd eliminate 2 faces and we'd have 2 sign faces remaining.
That's true.
But you would still have 2 billboards.
You could have
20 if they were big enough to see.
Well, but the signage, the square footage of the signage would not be, it would be the back of the sign. I mean, you'd have the back of the sign, so you wouldn't have advertising.
Because that's the way it's drafted.
But you call them 4 billboards, not 2, a front and a back for each one. There's some thing that needs clarification.
Well, it says the square footage of this area, we're reducing the area of
This billboard.
Right, is reduced by a minimum of
50%.
The area of said billboard, right. So you take the 4 signs, they may be
There are 4 signs that,
But look, let me just see if I can try to clarify this. So what I think maybe the concern is, and I am sure we can make, if this isn't accurate, please restate it, but there's 4 signs now, X amount of area, you're taking 2 down, but you could replace those 2 signs with 8 or 4 or whatever, as long as they're in the same area. Now, I don't know if you do that, because it would be difficult maybe to see from the road, but is that what the concern is that there may not be 2 there, there could really be 4 or 6 or something like that in the remaining area?
I'm thinking of Milano's that's on the way to Sunset, Sunrise. I mean, if they applied for an LED and you only see the front of that billboard, it doesn't have a back, do they have to cut that in half?
Yes. Yes, they would, because it's based on area.
So then why, I don't understand why it doesn't happen here.
Why there aren't 4 signs just half the size of what they used to be, all LEDs?
Forget the LED, just think of 1 LED.
Okay.
Because that's all they're asking for, is 1 LED right now.
Right.
So I'm saying, if Milano has to cut theirs in half, why don't they have to cut theirs in half?
Change the visual, front face.
Because they're calling them 4 billboards.
Well, they have 4 billboards. They have
Right,
4 large signs.
and they're getting rid of 2, and they'll have 2 left.
That's
1 will be
50% of
static,
4.
and 1 will be LED. But according to this, the area of said billboard is reduced by 50%.
That's what it says.
And it's not going to be reduced by 50%. It's going to be this big thing.
Right. What you're saying is, as drafted, the
Yes.
applicant is saying that if I have an existing billboard of 100 square feet, it has, if I make it 50 square feet, then I can be LED.
Right.
It has nothing to do with.
Because that's what will happen to Milano's, or Fonicello's, or Bishop's, but it wouldn't happen to them. They would have the same big, they'd have an LED twice as big.
The regulation needs to actually address overall area. Right now, it's speaking very singular, that it's the
Of
same
a billboard.
billboard, not the overall area. Which
I'm
makes
just
it
raising that as
confusing.
an
That's
issue.
a legitimate point.
Plain meaning of the reg. So maybe the total area of all billboards is what you intend to say here.
Correct, yes.
That's not what's written. That's not what it says, but yeah.
And it still allows the 4 smaller billboards.
Which, we'll get to that. Next question, please.
Joe Nogin, 423 New Whitfield Street. A question. You made a statement that the flip is controlled by state regulations.
Yes, the frequency.
The interval frequency, okay. So if this board approves this amendment, that control is technically out of their hands, correct? No.
No.
So you're saying this local board will be able to usurp state regulations? Is that what you're saying?
In this case, yes, that's what I'm saying.
Well, they want to make theirs 8 seconds, Jill, so it's.
Yes.
let's
I mean, if the state regs say 6, we could take it up to 8 or 10, but we couldn't reduce it to 2.
But if the state does change it, right, you're subject to litigation because they could come back 5 years from now and say, the state regulations dictate that we can have it a 1/10 of a second.
Well, they have to come in and file another proposed change.
And it's merely a procedure of filing an application.
And there'd be a public hearing like we're having tonight
Right.
with input, and then we can elect to change it or not change it.
Okay. Second question. Marketing. You say that an LED board is less expensive for your customers? I'd like to get clarification on that. Can you give us some figures? What would it cost for a 30-day exposure on a static board versus a 30-day exposure on the same LED board?
Quite frankly, I don't feel comfortable going into CBS's business model with you. I will say the reason why it's cheaper for an individual advertiser is because when you have a static sign, it stays the same for 30 days. That's a greater cost. If you have an LED sign and you could have 4 advertisers on the LED sign, they can bear the cost of that. So instead of having 1 person bear the cost for 30 days, you have 4 people bear the cost for 30 days, and it's less expensive for each.
Well, wait a minute, from a marketing point of view, you could also say, the fact that this board changes periodically, it grabs more attention. So people driving by or walking by are more apt to look at this, so therefore we can charge a higher rate. Is that correct?
I'm not going to dispute, CBS is in this business to make money. They're a corporation, like every other corporation in America, that their goal is to make money. They can sell, and LED billboards are more profitable for the billboard company. They're more expensive to build, they're more profitable for the billboard company. But one of the benefits of having the LED sign is they can accommodate more advertisers, and advertisers can purchase time at a rate that is less expensive than if they had to buy a static sign for a period of 30 days. So there's a benefit to CBS, there's also a benefit to the individual smaller advertiser who cannot afford to pay for advertising on a static sign for 30 days. It's a benefit to both parties.
With all due respect, Chairman Lee, you raised the point of how this would be cost beneficial to advertisers, and yet when asked to explain or justify or substantiate that statement, you've said, I don't want to go into CBS's business model. So the question raised is, if it costs $100 for a static sign and now I have 4 transient signs, is it now $25, or is it, I understand you don't want to quote your rates, but you're telling me how this is a great deal, and yet when asked, you're not backing it up.
Okay, I'm going to have Mr. Asparo to discuss the cost of advertising. Obviously, advertising varies on the location of the sign, so maybe he can address that issue better than I can.
When LEDs first came out, just to your point, that was the conventional thought. Hey, they grab more attention, we could get more money for them. What actually has transpired in the billboard industry is that people are saying, hey, why are we going to pay for less advertising time? In the billboard business, we call it exclusivity. When an advertiser wants to stay on the sign for an extended period of time on the board, they don't share the board. So so the consumer has gotten smart, and they're saying we're not going to pay the same amount as a static board. So we're finding that the rates for the LED boards are coming down. Now, generally speaking, for typical billboards, of that size in local communities, you could probably cut in half the cost. So basically, the cost, depending on the location, obviously we chose the location here is because it's a viable location that gets a lot of requests. Generally speaking, the price rate on an LED flip, depending on supply and demand, is probably maybe a third or half. That's probably how it breaks out. They're probably saving half to 2/3.
Okay. Any other questions from this, sir?
Dr. Barry Farbrother, address 40 Cotillo Drive, Guildford. Interesting discussion. I'd like to request some information about the luminosity of these signs. There's been reference to the light produced by these signs as being similar to a street light. Are we able to get any information about the luminosity output and preferably in terms of watts or lumens, and some information about the visibility of these signs in terms of distance? Thank you.
There is actually data with regards to the illumination of the signs. The signs at all times are 0.3 foot candles above ambient light, which is the equivalent of a street sign. or of a street lantern. So whether the sign is lit during the day or the sign is lit in the evening, it always remains 0.3-foot candles above ambient light. The only thing that changes is obviously when there's more, when the sun is out, we need more light to raise the level to 0.3-foot candles above ambient. But there is information that supports how the board is lit.
Help me to understand that comparison when you said 0.3-foot candles above ambient light, which is comparable to a street light. Are you saying that the light emitted by a LED billboard is the same as one street light, or it's the same as a billboard made up of a bunch of street lights?
The best way to look at it, to envision it, is if you were in space looking down. Obviously, the billboard, the glow that comes off the billboard would be larger because of the actual size of the billboard.
Okay, so it's bigger than a street light.
No, the glow that comes off the billboard, okay, is obviously going to be larger, but it's not brighter. There's a difference. Because the street light is actually a smaller bulb, the billboard is a multitude, but the glow always is the same, 0.3-foot candles above ambient, and that's federally regulated.
And the other thing that I've noticed driving along
because it's restricted to the LED sign, it doesn't give more things.
Is now a good time?
I'm sorry. What I was going to ask you is, right now the signs are lit up at night. I mean, we're not going from a situation where there's nothing to a situation where we're putting an LED sign. We're going from a situation where there is a sign that is lit up at night, and now we're proposing to have an LED sign which will be lit up at night. So we're not starting at ground zero or total blackness. What I asked Mr. Sparrow is, could he compare the light that emanates from the sign now to the light that would emanate from the sign if it was converted to LED, and is there a difference in that light or not? Just so we're comparing.
Well, this may follow up specifically to that. When you're talking about the existing signs and the existing lighting, the lights are directed towards the sign, and now the lights would be emitting from the sign. And when I'm driving along I-95 and I see the billboards, the LED billboards that are in East Haven and or New Haven, maybe it's the annex, they appear to change brightness based off of the background and whether the background is light or dark. And if it's a dark red sign with some lettering, it looks less obvious than if it's a lighter sign, and it sure looks like it's getting brighter to me. I mean, maybe I need to go to lighting school to understand why a light background seems brighter to me than a dark red background.
You're actually correct. It does change, but it still stays 0.3-foot candles above ambient. And the reason why it does change is because to push the white color, you need a lot more light to expose the white. That's why good outdoor advertising always has darker backgrounds.
Other questions from the public? Okay, let me ask, is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? Okay, hearing none, is there anyone who would like to speak against the applications? Okay, remember, we're taking both of them. Okay, Shirley, why don't you go first, and then if we can form a second.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I only have a packet of letters opposed. I don't have any.
There were none.
A packet of letters in favor.
There aren't any.
There aren't any. In the record, just for the record, we've got 67 letters in opposition, and to the best of my knowledge, there are no letters in support.
Thank you.
You're supposed to read that.
Shirley Carioni, 199 Whitfield Street, Guilford. I'm speaking on behalf of the Guilford Preservation Alliance. We have approximately 450 members. Dear Chairman Bauer, the GPA opposes the proposed amendments to the zoning code, paragraph 273-58L6 and section 273-2 definitions for the following important reasons. One, the proposed change is in direct conflict with Guilford's long-standing zoning code, section 273-58, section 5, which provides a list of the signs that shall not be permitted. It states that no flashing, cycling, intermittent, light reflecting, revolving, moving, continuous strip lighting, or image display signs, LCD or LED, shall be permitted. This code was formulated and based on 2 years of study and extensive public input and support. The intent of this regulation was testified to by the town's zoning enforcement officer at the August 15, 2012 public hearing meeting and affirmed by a member of the study committee at the same hearing. 2, the proposed change is in direct conflict with the spirit and letter of the Town Plan of Conservation and Development, which establishes that all construction is to be consistent with the character and scale of the community. This proposal is not only inconsistent with the character of Guilford, it would set a dramatic precedent for the entire state of Connecticut. At the hearing in August, the applicant admitted that no such LED signs have been approved in any town in Connecticut except on limited access highways. It is significant that the Branford Planning and Zoning recently overwhelmingly denied this applicant's proposal for the same amendments. 3, it is in conflict with the spirit of the Commission's regulations on lighting, which strive to protect neighboring properties from light pollution and to protect the night sky. We believe these amendments will create significant light pollution for nearby residences. In spite of the applicant's previous assertions regarding light control, one of the many reasons for their seeking the changes is increased visibility and therefore brightness. 4, it will create traffic hazards and exacerbate traffic problems at the billboard sites. The bright and rapidly changing signs would be a distraction for drivers and a safety problem, particularly at the location where this applicant is aiming to put this LED. The proposed changes will dramatically increase the total number of advertising messages per square foot of billboard and greatly increase the number of bright and changing LED billboards in Guilford over time. Guilford attracts residents and businesses because of its reputation for charm and its cultural, natural, and historic resources. It would be a shame to undermine the efforts of previous planning and zoning commissions to upgrade the character of Route 1 after countless hours of public hearings, considerable expenditures by the town for professional studies, and the input of many Guilford citizens. It would also be a shame if Guilford became the first of 169 towns in Connecticut to approve such billboards along roads like Route 1. I know in your packet there's a letter from the Design Review Committee, and I would just respectfully remind the Commission that 12 years ago we had a study of Route 1 east and west, and $40,000 was spent by the town to develop design guidelines. And this proposal does not fit in with any of those design guidelines. Thank you.
Please.
Joe Nugent, 423 New Whitfield Street. Many people who know me, I'm a person of many words. One word I could use for a visual image of this sign is tacky. That's it. It's tacky. Second of all, a sign like this will add to light pollution in the town. I don't think we need it. I'd recommend that the Commission disallow this change in the zoning regulations.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition?
I'm Ted Romaine at 321 Old Whitfield. Not to go into too much background, I did 24 years in the Air Force as a pilot, and I spent part of my time there as a flying safety officer. helping design airfields. One of the main things you're concerned about in a situation like that is clearly identifying hazards. There's all kinds of hazards around airfields: towers, water towers, light poles, buildings of any kind, hills, anything. The one thing that we always had to do if we couldn't remove them was simply to paint them bright colors and put lights on them. You want to make them as distracting as possible. I seriously question whatever data has been provided from whatever agency that says bright light, well-lighted billboards aren't distracting to drivers. They're there to get the driver's attention. If you want to get their attention, paint it bright and put lights on it, flashing lights especially. I feel very strongly that this will be a driving hazard, that this will be a distraction, and I urge the board to disapprove this proposal.
Thank you for your input. Anyone else wishing to speak against the application? Okay, last opportunity for questions, and then I'll ask the applicant if they would like to make a rebuttal to any of the statements. Any questions from anyone? Okay, if you could go ahead with your rebuttal.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor the point. I think we've had a good discussion tonight about this particular application, the pros and the cons, and I don't want to belabor that point. With regard to the one thing I do want to clarify was with regard to the light. As I said, right now there is an existing billboard. The lights are shown into the billboard, but the light reflects off the billboard out into the world, so to speak. I asked Mr. Sparrow during the break to answer that question. He said the existing billboard sign, the way the light reflects at night, will generate more light and light pollution than an LED sign would be. So once again, the LED sign would have less light pollution than the existing static sign when it's lit up at night. This is going to come down to the Commission's discretion and whether they think that the proposal we set forth is going to be better for the town of Guilford in the long run than what currently exists. And I freely admit it's a trade-off. We're sacrificing, or intended under the regulations, to sacrifice 2 of our existing sign faces, and once those sign faces go, they could never be built back up again. The regulation doesn't allow the reconstruction of a billboard sign. It doesn't allow the construction of a billboard sign to begin with. So once again, from our perspective, that's our sacrifice. We are reducing our signs in half. In consideration for that reduction, we're asking for permission to convert one of those signs to LED. And like I said, it's a trade-off between us and the Commission. I think to address the issues regarding safety concerns, we did submit some documentation to the Commission tonight. There are reports from the National Highway Traffic Association. There is the study from Virginia Tech, which was an independent study done. Those studies indicate that LED billboards do not pose any traffic hazard concerns. I would urge the Commission to read those studies, come to their own conclusion about whether they think that these billboard signs will propose a threat. And I think if they go through the material, they'll discover that based on the empirical data, LED signs do not pose a traffic hazard. In conclusion, we'd just like to thank the Commission for the opportunity to come before you. We do urge you to approve the regulation, and if you do so, we look forward to being back in front of you at the time we submit the special permit application.
Okay, thank you. David, you have one question?
I do, because you quite demonstratively brought this to our attention of how the first document on the top, do you know where this came from? Because it doesn't have any attribution on it. And then
Federal Highway Department.
This is the Federal Highway Department? I'm not sure I'm familiar with the Federal Highway Department.
National Traffic Association.
FHAWA.
Do we have a... I'm just at... No. It's a piece of paper that says...
FHAWA.
FHAWA.
Okay, and just quickly, as I was looking, most of the reports that you submitted, the Arbitron one, the OAA lighting, they're essentially talking about how effective are billboards in catching people's attention, but it's not until I get to the very end when I hit the Virginia Tech document, which is titled Driving Performance in Digital Billboards. I note that it says it's prepared for the Foundation for Outdoor Advertising Research and Education. That's a neutral body that has no skin in the game in terms of outdoor advertising, or it's a trade organization?
My understanding was that it was an independent, that Virginia Tech did an independent analysis of the impacts of billboards.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, with that, we will close the public hearing on this item. If I can, why don't we change the DVD now, so we'll take a 5-minute break. Okay, with that on the record, I would like to get a motion to approve the revised agenda. Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, we'll take up the public hearing items. Since there's still people in the room for the LED item, I wanted to just take that one up first. So this would be both the amendment to the zoning code, the definition of the billboard, and the amendment to the zoning code. Before we get any motion on the table, I'd just like to make a proposal to the commission that a lot of new written information has come into the record tonight, and we've heard a lot of testimony. I think in fairness to both the applicant and the opposition, it would pay to take the opportunity to go through the record carefully, especially the written material that both the applicant and the opposition has provided us. Have the opportunity to take a look at that and then take this up at our next meeting and deliberate and vote on the those two proposed amendments at that time. Any comments?
I like that idea. I saw there's a lot of information. I was trying to read it and listen at the same time. It was, there's a lot of information.
So did you make that a motion?
Well, he's making it a suggestion.
I'm making it a suggestion, so if somebody would like to make a motion that we table this until the next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion, or is it pretty much all been said? All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. So April 17th, we will take this up and vote on it at that time. In the meantime, we'll review the record and be prepared to deliberate on this. Okay, if I can get a motion on the first item, which is the Town Center South Overlay Zone District, then we'll take the zoning map up separately.
I've lost my...
well, there's a motion here. I suppose the first thing to do would be to read a motion.
Yes, that's correct. That's what
well,
I'm asking.
I'm not sure what do we want to put in this motion, because it just says
what it says on the agenda, on the agenda. That's what you're going to plant into.
Okay.
It's a little, no.
So we would be putting under number 1, that would be.
Well, I would say.
Okay, I see.
Yes.
So if we could, if everybody looks at the agenda, and we would simply extract under 1 the words amend the zoning code to create an Article 31. There is hereby created a Town Center South Overlay Zone District. This district allows by special permit residential and commercial uses in addition to the uses allowed by the underlying districts. These new uses are intended to be appropriate to a transit-oriented neighborhood and generally are of higher density and more intense than otherwise allowed. This amendment is approved based upon a finding that it conforms with the Plan of Conservation Development and is effective April 12, 2013.
Okay, do I hear a second? Second. Okay, discussion.
How does that motion incorporate this document dated February 26, 2013? Or are we just simply...
That's a summary of that.
Where does it say that?
Well, Tom just made the motion which reflected the agenda, which has the capsule description. It didn't really say that, but is that your intent?
Do you need to add that as a
Can we, is that your intent, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we need to do then is to amend the motion to agree with the proposal dated such and such.
I think it would be amend the zoning code to create a new Article 31, which incorporates the specific sections as set forth in the proposed amendment dated February 26, 2013.
Good.
Is what you meant to
I will
say.
accept that.
And do I hear a second? Yes.
Second.
All right, now we can have some discussion on it. Who would like to go first?
Well, I mean, there were many fine points about the septic systems, whether or not it's going to be off-site and so forth. Obviously, we need to have some more in-depth information about how the septic service is going to service that particular community. I don't think there's enough information.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem here is, you know, what goes first. I can understand the Board of Selectmen's point of view in that they don't want to invest a lot of time and money for something that's not going to be approved anyways. So they're looking for some guidance here. My real question to George and to Brian was, you know, was this premature in the sense that would there, in other words, depending on the outcome of that study with the septic system, would there be drastic changes to the wording here, or what's allowed or what's not allowed? And I think what I heard is no, they're not anticipating anything really significant that would come out, whether or not they could do it or not. I think a lot of the questions that came up with regard to the septic system, like who has priority and who is it first come first serve, is it whoever, you know, pays the most money gets the most capacity, et cetera, are going to have to be answered by the study, and really those are policy decisions. I think, you know, it's not really a land use question as much as it is a policy question that the town's going to have to answer through. Probably Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen are going to have to make the call on how that happens. But again, I think, based on what I heard from George, I think there is enough here to approve it, based on the fact that, you know, the representations are made that it's not likely there's going to be significant changes to it. Anybody else?
I am still of the opinion I don't often agree with Peter, but I'm of the opinion that it is premature. I mean, I think Kim raised a very valid question when she pointed out that the mechanism for residential is units per acre, and when we do that elsewhere in Guilford, it's under the auspices of the fact that the septic system is required to be on site, and so we can look at the property, we can ballpark guesstimate in terms of wetlands and how much of the land is useful for a septic, what kind of density we're looking at. If we end up with a town septic system designed that can have 3,000 bedrooms, and we suddenly apply the 6 units, but we don't know if it's going to be one bedroom or 2 bedroom or 4 bedroom units. That's going to change the impact on the school system. It's going to change the impact on traffic. And, you know, absent having a handle on what are the best and worst case outcomes, I'm reluctant to endorse this amendment. I have specific concerns and questions about some of the language. I'd love to have tweaked this further. I was asking the questions about height. I'm puzzled by the section that talks about the projects may be permitted in residential zones when the principal development is located in a non-residential, and then it says when said residential zone is adjacent to the non-residential and the use of the residentially zoned property is necessary in order to facilitate a successful project. I'm not sure what a successful project is. Necessary means need, facilitate means make things easier. I'm not sure how you need something to make things easier. I don't know what we're getting by approving this right now, and I think what we're getting is going to, in large part, hinge upon what happens with the Pages Lane property. I don't think anyone's in disagreement that the area down there, particularly the industrial properties, need rezoning. I just don't know if this is the right framework to stick on top of it, absent more information. So that's my concern.
Tom?
When we started talking about this tonight, I was I had read all the stuff and I was sort of thinking that it was premature, but I'm going to vote for this because I really think we need to start somewhere. And I don't see zoning code as something, I mean, I keep hearing it's, you know, that we wrote a piece of code in 1985 and we should never change it. To me, the code is designed to meet the needs of the community, balance ownership of property with the needs of the community for safety and all that other stuff. So I think that this can be tweaked, but I think it would be a great sign if the Planning and Zoning Commission approved this tonight, so the Board of Selectmen has a good sense that whatever where this finally lands, that we are going to approve it. I think it's, I don't know where the Board of Selectmen, whether they would decide not to spend the $65,000 for a study, but I think if they have a good sense that we're on board with this, though we may reshape it somewhat, that they're more likely to go ahead with that study, and I think this could be a big plus for that part of town. And it's clear from the study that went on for the original Town Center South, this was a fundamental piece of that whole study, and a lot of very smart people spent a lot of time on that. And so I'm going to vote for it.
Question.
Sure,
I was a little bit confused by Kim's question before during the public hearing, and I'm not sure I addressed it exactly the way she phrased the question. But this is the way we always define permitted residential densities, by number of units per acre. In all of the commercial zones, you know, we have a upper limit on units per residential density as defined by the number of units, not by the number of bedrooms. The only situation where we regulate number of bedrooms in zoning is in the planned residential development district special permit. Everywhere else, we either have a units per acre designation, or we have a minimum lot size in the case of residential zones. And again, the minimum lot size is per unit of residential development. It doesn't say you can only have a 2-bedroom unit or a 3-bedroom unit. The size of the unit in terms of bedrooms is regulated by the public health code and by the sewage disposal capacity. All this does is fix a maximum density that we think is appropriate. It doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get 6 units per acre on any given parcel, which is obviously a function of a whole lot of variables. Whether a specific development could get 6 units per acre or not depends on a lot of factors, including what kind of sewage disposal capabilities there are. And because it's a special permit, a specific plan for dwelling units are going to be created, and we will know at the time the special permit is approved whether it's 6 2-bedroom dwelling units or 6 4-bedroom dwelling units. All of that will be fixed at the time the specific plan is approved, and we will only approve numbers of bedrooms and numbers of units which can be supported by sewage disposal. As you know, we get a recommendation from the Director of Health that says, you know, this site or this lot can support this project based on sewage disposal needs and so forth. That same type of recommendation, I think, would come from the Director of Health or from some new entity if this development is going to be attached to this new sewage disposal system that says, where the Board of Selectmen or the Water Pollution Control Authority or somebody says, yes, we've allocated so many gallons per day to this particular project, and then so many bedrooms, and therefore you, the Planning and Zoning Commission, can approve it with the understanding that the sewage disposal is going to be provided by either the on-site situation, which would be our standard way of dealing with it, through a recommendation of the Director of Health, or through the approval of whatever this entity is that's managing the sewage system. So the real question on density is whether or not this number is high enough to accommodate what we want, not whether or not it's too high because of sewage disposal, because that's going to be regulated regardless of what the zoning densities are by either the public health code or by the limits that are placed on it by this new entity managing the public sewer system, if there is such a thing. So I would be concerned with whether or not this number is high enough, not whether it's too high. Just like we are with, You know, we have 6 units and 8 units per acre, which are allowed in our commercial zones, with the idea of you know, encouraging multifamily housing. And that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed 6 units per acre, and it doesn't mean you're guaranteed any number of bedrooms. All that does is set an upper limit.
But again, just back to the point that I think Kim was making, and I certainly was trying to communicate, all of those instances, we're talking about a requirement where the septic system is located on the same parcel, and that has in and of itself built-in limitations which we are relatively familiar with. If it's a 2-acre lot, they're not going to be able to fit 30 units or 50 bedrooms or something. We just kind of know that's going to happen because of physical restraints. When we're talking about PRDs, that's specific to a specific property and a specific project. We already know, based off of when the applicant comes in and says, I want a PRD, and I've done the perk test, and here's how many bedrooms, and here's how many units I'm proposing, 2 bedrooms like they did out on Sachem's Benton's Knoll or something like that.
Yep.
Here we're kind of in the dark. Are we going to have a septic system?
We're only in the dark to the extent that if we believe that 6 units per acre, aside from the question of sewage disposal, which is not under your jurisdiction anyway, if 6 units, if you can envision a situation where 6 units per acre is too much for reasons other than sewage disposal, then we should be concerned with that number. The only testimony we heard was in fact that 6 units per acre might not be enough to make a project like the ones we want actually occur. I don't think that we should be concerned about this being too much for sewage disposal purposes, because that's going to be managed. How it's going to be managed, I mean, there's ambiguity and it's unknown because we haven't created this public entity yet to regulate sewage disposal off-site. But there will be a limit that's going to be placed on any individual development if they're proposing to use the public sewage disposal system.
There's also a natural limit here too of Whitfield Street trying to get down there, and the traffic study will be provided. So if somebody's going to try to do 200-300 unit residential areas, I mean, it's just not going to, whether you have this sewage capacity or not.
Well, it's ironic that we're talking about traffic because the whole premise of this whole development is supposed to be, we're supposed to be encouraging development so that people are going to take the train to work. Sure. Whether they do or not, you know, we can't dictate that, but we're trying to create that kind of atmosphere.
Well,
but in any event,
they might drive, but they might, you're correct, they might drive.
I think we will probably be revisiting this thing at some point and making some tweaks once we get a better handle.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Waste disposal.
Well,
there are some
one major advantage, though. I'd like to just point out one thing. There's one major advantage, I think, to the town, and that is in terms of the amount of money that's going to be added to the grand list. And I know this for a fact, and here's why. I've lived on Rollwood. It's a condo complex very close to where this is going to be. This development's going to take place. I've lived there for 19 years. There are 70 units. In the 19 years that I've lived there, there have only been 2 units where you had kids old enough or young enough, I guess, that had to utilize the Guilford school system. So basically, Guilford got a lot of tax revenue and didn't have to spend any money on the people that were there. And I think from what Brian told me, this is going to be a very similar type of community. It's basically geared 1 or 2 bedrooms, just the way Rollwood is. So they probably will not be kids. And the only children that I know that lived on Rollwood are kids where basically they're going through a divorce or divorced. And but as far as
sorry, I'm sure you're still on topic. I just didn't.
But I mean, basically, it's a situation where it's not really geared for a family. It's people are going to buy a house somewhere else. So I think it's a real big plus to the town.
Okay, is there any more discussion anybody would like to have?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with most, or a lot, probably most of what Brian and George presented tonight. And I also agree with Tom that maybe the Board of Selectmen might need some guidance from us, but this is still a little bit vague for me, and there's a lot of new information this evening on a lot of the bullet points that are that are in this proposed amendment. So I am not comfortable moving on it at this time.
Okay. Anything else? All right, well, I guess we have a motion on the table for approval, so we can go forward with a vote. All in favor? Okay, all opposed? Any
Are you opposed or abstained?
I'm abstained, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, got it.
Okay, so then it's approved.
That's 5-1-1.
Okay, the next item is the proposed amendment to the zoning map with regard to the amendment that we just approved. If someone can make a motion with regard to that.
Oh, boy. I'm good at this one. Okay, motion for voted the Guilford Planning and Zoning. I can't deny it. It's already been approved. Let's see what we're going to do here. Voted the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve and yep, you're good. Amendment to the zoning code map as follows. Amend the zoning map by adding an overlay district known as the Town Center South Overlay District. This district generally encompasses the area around the Guilford train station, including Whitfield Street, both north and south of the railroad tracks, extending to the town marina on the south.
You can also then say, as shown on this document, it's got a date and everything on it, title and date.
Shown on a map titled Town of Guilford Proposed Town Center South District Overlay Zone District, dated April 2nd, 2013.
Gotcha.
Okay, and do you want to just add the part about the amendment is approved based upon the finding?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, having heard that, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Since sort of the same discussion as on the prior, we should probably get the same vote. Okay, hearing no discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, you have that, Jeanette?
Yep.
Okay, we will move on to the site plans. First item is Chris Kraniak. Oh, withdrawn, so we don't need to do that one. Okay, number 2. I have a question about this one, George. Walmart property located 900 Boston Post Road. This is a site plan revision to allow the outdoor display of seasonal landscaping and gardening merchandise from March 15th through October 30th. Receive and schedule a hearing on May 1st.
Not a hearing.
Well,
Right, they have to go to ZBA.
Oh, okay. Okay. My only question is, how come they're asking for it from March 15th if we're not hearing it until May 1st?
I guess, do they have it out
That's
there now?
supposed to be May, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. May 1st.
May 15th?
15th.
May 15th. All right, that makes a lot more sense.
Mr. Chairman, didn't we approve this last year? Didn't we allowed this once, see how it was going to go?
That's right.
Did we?
I think we did, and we wanted to maintain some control over it to see if there was any complaints.
Were there any issues?
Any complaints, issues? Good. All right, well, we'll take it up at when we put it on the agenda. Next item is a campsite plan. This is Sharon Crane, property located 151 Neck Road. This is a campsite plan application, replacement of a previously existing deck destroyed by Tropical Storm Sandy on a property within 100 feet of critical coastal resource. Proceedings at a public hearing for May 1st.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a site walk to be scheduled on that one, on that coming up?
Yep, I have to sit down and make sure, I want to get them all done, the ones coming up and these.
Good. And the other one too, right, which is Joshua McGuire's property located at 128 Tunnels Point Road. This is a after-the-fact coastal area management site plan application for reconstruction repair of a previously existing seawall in the same location and at the same height as it was before Tropical Storm Sandy. Proceedings at a public hearing date of May 1st.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll get that one on the sidewalk schedule as well. We have a special permit for Shoreline Strings, property located at 125, 129 Water Street. This is a special permit for a change in non-conforming use from office to music construction. Receive and set a public hearing for May 1st. Hear a motion?
No, you don't need public hearing.
Yeah, it's a special permit, non-conforming use.
Special
Yes.
permit.
Change in
It's a change in non-conforming
Change in
use.
non-conforming use.
It's not.
It's always a
flooring store,
special
right?
permit.
Oh, okay, yes, yes, you do.
All right.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have a letter from John Matthews with regard to 33455 Boston Post Road. This is the old Guilford Tavern.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I think this letter is somewhat moot. They haven't actually made the building permit application yet, but the applicant
what are they asking?
also, it doesn't require any extension on our part. The legislature passed a law a few years ago which grants expiration time for approved site plans of 9 years. So this application, the site plan which was approved in 2007, is still valid, assuming that the applicant proposes a building plan which is identical to the approved plan, which is our understanding that is what he wants to do.
So this is just really an FYI for
Yes,
us.
correct.
And
Yeah.
as long as the building permit conforms exactly to
That's
what's
right.
been approved in the site plan,
That's right.
he's good to go. All right. Although it's not listed here under other, the annual meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission is always held during the first April meeting each year. And the only items that I'm aware that we have on the agenda this evening is the election of officers, so I'll ask for a report from the nominating committee, Peter and David.
I'm very happy to announce that Ray Bauer was nominated and accepted the chairmanship of the Planning and Zoning, and also Tom Koss was nominated and accepted to be vice chairman of Planning and Zoning.
Thank you for your vote of confidence.
Thank you for contributing to this town's success.
How about secretary?
Was there a nomination for secretary?
Yes, there was a secret meeting held between myself and Mike Sassine, and we overwhelmingly felt that Walter would be highly qualified to be secretary, and I decided not to call him so that I wanted it to be a surprise.
Okay.
That's my nomination.
I second it.
You can accept or
It would
not.
seem that the two of them voted
All right,
against me.
we have the nominations. Do I hear a second?
Well, it's,
You have to pay your
essentially,
penance.
it's him or me, because Mike really indicated that his family issues are overriding right now.
Okay. Any discussion on the candidates?
If you don't want it, I'll take it.
No, he's going to take it. He has no
Yeah.
choice.
I appreciate all of the work that you do for this committee, and I think probably this is something that I can take up some of the slack for you.
Very good, very good. Okay, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Good. All right, committees, planning committee's going to meet Tuesday, April 16th, 5:15 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Town Hall, and then the zoning committee is going to meet on April 8th, 5 p.m. in Town Hall South. Any bills? It doesn't show any here for Shore Publishing.
It didn't come in.
Okay, we'll move on to the approval of the March 20th minutes, which should be in your packet, so.
And Bennett Hall was completely withdrawn?
That is correct. Both applications were withdrawn.
Meaning he's coming back, or he's talked to the neighbors and found a... He's gone.
Remember Tom
That's what he's
Cronin
gonna do.
did that with,
He's going to do that.
Chris McManus had him withdraw at the last minute because
Yeah.
he said we could get around it, and well, he's done exactly the same thing with this.
No, not exactly. He's not going to build anything within the town's jurisdiction.
Right.
Any structure
Instead of 36.
that he can build is below the high water, so it doesn't require any permits from us.
Right, so it's not our jurisdiction to the extent anybody wants to challenge it. That's with the state or the court.
Fair enough.
Okay, March 20th minutes. Are there any updates, changes, modifications, etc.? All right, hearing none, I'll ask for a motion.
So moved.
Second. Okay, any further discussion, any changes before we vote?
I think I actually did too. Yeah, I think we're okay.
All right, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
I abstain.
That's- Okay, one abstention. Okay, having no further business, call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? We're adjourned.